GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. and welcome to the Moss and Daubney show on GB News. And we're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. On today's show, raids are underway to detain the first migrants to be deported to Rwanda. Is Rishi Sunak's Stop the Boats policy finally working? Or is this just a government PR stunt ahead of tomorrow's local elections? I know what I think. And it comes as more than 1,700 migrants cross the English Channel in small boats in just over 1 week. Is the scale of the problem simply getting unimaginable? And another school stabbing, this time in Sheffield. 3 people have been injured and a 17-year-old arrested for attempted murder. We're expecting to hear from the police in this hour, and I'll be asking the question, is this the beginnings of a school stabbing epidemic? And meanwhile, it follows news that the 14-year-old killed in yesterday's sword attack went to the same school as those of the fatally stabbed in Nottingham last June. And that's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Always an absolute delight to have your company. So, am I being a cynic, or is this clampdown on Rwanda the night before elections merely a coincidence? The boots are going through the door as if on cue. A voluntary, solitary person is being sent to Rwanda. They get a £3,000 lump payment. They get 5 years free food and lodgings. They get a guaranteed job. Wouldn't you mind a bit of that? You sometimes think that this country isn't taking care of its own, it's taking care of those who came here illegally, and you are picking up the tab. Let me know what you think about that. Get in touch all your usual ways. Plus, gbnews.com/your say. You can get your opinions to me there, and I promise I'll read out a bunch of them before the end of the show. I keep getting told off for not reading out enough. Today, we're going to put that right. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines, and it's Sophia Wensler.
Thanks, Martin. Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 3. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. The first migrants set to be deported to Rwanda have been detained. The Home Office says a series of operations took place across the country this week, with more due to be carried out in the coming weeks. Officials have not yet said how many people have been detained or where they were taken into custody. It comes ahead of the government's bid to get flights off the ground by July after the Safety Rwanda Act became law last week. Meanwhile, more than 1,700 small migrants have crossed the channel in small boats this week. GB News can reveal after several more boats were intercepted in the UK waters today. A boatload of around 70 migrants was taken to Dover Harbour by lifeboat in the early hours of this morning. So far today, around 400 people have been taken to the Border Force Migrant Processing Centre. Official figures for yesterday reveal 268 migrants arrived in the UK on 5 small boats. The Prime Minister says the death of a 14-year-old boy in the Hainault stabbing attack was absolutely heartbreaking. Rishi Sunak has also paid tribute to the police, saying they showed the highest standards of public service in dealing with the incident. Video captured the moment police arrested the man wielding a sword. The 36-year-old was arrested on suspicion of murder and remains in hospital. Police say they've been unable to interview him due to his condition. Met Police Chief Sir Mark Rowley says a female police officer came close to losing her hand.
We were on the ground in 12 minutes. And he was detained after 22 minutes. Obviously, some of the first contacts led to officers being very severely injured. I went to the hospital yesterday and to see the officers and their families. I saw the inspector whose hand's badly damaged, and I was talking to the family and colleagues of the officer, woman officer who's really badly damaged arm, really seriously damaged, and the surgeon spent sort of many hours sort of basically putting her arm back together.
Meanwhile, a 17-year-old boy has been arrested for attempted murder after 3 people were injured at a school in Sheffield. Officers were called to Burley Community College just before 9 o'clock this morning after reports of an incident involving a sharp object. A child was assaulted and 2 adults suffered minor injuries. The suspect remains in police custody. Police have arrested 3 people during a pro-Palestinian protest outside a government building in central London. Hundreds of demonstrators held a rally outside the Department for Business and Trade. Organisers say workers and trade unionists also held protests outside BAE Systems sites to show solidarity with Palestinian workers. And violent clashes have erupted on the campus of the University of California in Los Angeles. It's between pro-Palestinian protesters and a group of counter-demonstrators. Riot police had to break up crowds this morning. It comes hours after New York City police arrested approximately 300 pro-Palestinian demonstrators occupying a building on Columbia University campus in New York. Speaking a short while ago, New York City Mayor Eric Adams said the protest was not led by students.
Well, those who broke into the building did include students. It was led by individuals who are not affiliated with the university. The school needed the NYPD's assistance to clear Hamilton Hall and the encampments outside. And we said from the beginning that students have a right to protest, and free speech is the cornerstone of our society. But as our major concern, we knew and we saw that there were those who were never concerned about free speech. They were concerned about chaos.
And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Martin.
Thank you, Sophia. Now we start with huge developments with regards to the government's flagship policy to stop the boats, or at least try to. The first migrants set to be deported to Rwanda have now been detained, and the Home Office said a series of operations took place across the country this week. And meanwhile, GB News can reveal that more than 1,700 migrants crossed the English Channel on small boats in just over 1 week alone. And for more detail, I'm joined now by GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. I think you nailed it rather neatly earlier on when you said, isn't this all rather cynically timed on the eve of elections?
Well, I certainly think that opposition politicians will be rather suspicious, Martin, about the timing of this. It's clear that the government is desperate to show that there is some momentum in the Rwanda policy after 2 years now of stagnation since Boris Johnson first stood up at Lyd Airport in Kent and announced this flagship policy, which the government believed then and still believes now will act as a deterrent to stop those coming across the English Channel. And as such, we've had a number of raids that have been carried out by immigration enforcement at multiple locations around the country. Now, what we understand is that 5,700 people are earmarked for deportation to Rwanda. They were actually earmarked last year before this got once again bogged down in the courts when the Court of Appeal ruled that the Rwanda policy was unlawful, and then that was put on hold effectively. So those 5,700 individuals have been in limbo ever since. Now the hope is, from the government's point of view, that they will be able to locate all of those 5,700, despite, of course, the reports that well over half that number seem to be uncontactable at the moment. But we'll see how that plays out in the weeks ahead. The plan at the moment, Martin, is for the first flights to take off, according to the government, between 9 and 11 weeks from now, if all goes well, if there are no other delays like those pesky court sort of proceedings that we've had on multiple occasions over the last couple of years.
And no doubt, Mark White, as sure as night follows day, that will come next. And you're right to say politicians have been critical, and the Lib Dem leader Ed Davey criticised the government on its Rwanda policy. And let's hear what he had to say earlier, Mark.
Rishi Sunak promised to stop the boats. This won't stop the boats. It's an old scheme. It's not even his own scheme. They've had to pay someone £3,000. There's suspicion out there that this is about the election. It's not about seriously stopping the boats. And afraid ministers are utterly desperate. They're trying to win headlines that actually undermine their own promises. What we want to see is a government on the NHS and sorting out the waiting list, making sure NHS down, cutting the cancer waiting time. We need a government focusing on the environment, like sewage prices, tackling crime. I mean, the Conservatives have given up things that matter.
We appear to have Ed Davey on echo there, as if one Ed Davey isn't enough. In fact, Cooper Mark also saying this is £3,000 per volunteer, could work out an average £2 million per person. And of course, Mark, as you just reported, 1,700 arriving by small boats in 1 week alone. Can Rwanda ever cope with that kind of volume?
Well, we've heard from Paul Kagame, actually, within the last week, saying that he's willing to take as many people as Britain wants to send his way. So we will wait to see what happens in the fullness of time. My understanding was always, in speaking to senior officials at the Home Office, that they are really pinning their hopes on a few thousand being sent, and that acting as the deterrent that people coming across the channel, the people smugglers, in terms of their business model, will see that start to disintegrate. I'm not sure whether that is likely to be the case in reality. It might be a tad on the optimistic front, but they've earmarked 5,700 as what they say is the first cohort, and that's what we're seeing at the moment with those that are being rounded up. You're right, Martin, to point out those 1,700 who've come across the English Channel in just 8 days. And Kemi Badenoch, Cabinet Secretary, was speaking to GB News this morning and really highlighting how that Rwanda policy is now very much required to deal with what is playing out in the English Channel.
I think we should remember that we're spending £8 million a day on this issue. That is not something that is sustainable. We have to deal with it. People said the Rwanda scheme wouldn't work. They tried to say that it wasn't a safe country. If it wasn't a safe country, we wouldn't have people volunteering to go. This shows that the scheme is working. People go to Rwanda on holiday. I know someone who's gone there on a gap year. We need to actually make sure that this scheme works. And that's what the Prime Minister is focusing on, getting people on those flights and getting them over there.
Well, of course, we know a migrant who's gone there as well, having been paid £3,000 by the government to go. This is a separate scheme to the Rwanda policy, which would be the forced deportation of asylum seekers. There have been one or two eyebrows raised, Martin, about paying migrants £3,000, but actually maybe that is cheap at a fraction of the cost, because keeping them here in the UK, if you just do the maths, it's £8 million a day for 50,000 people in hotels. That's working out at almost £180 per day, which works out at about £65,000 each year, which then spans into multiple years. So perhaps £3,000 is a small price to pay.
Mark White, excellent as ever. £3,000 signing on bonus, free food and lodging for 5 years, a guaranteed job. Makes you wonder, it'd be quite a nice little ticket. Thank you very much, Mark White, as ever. Now, let's cross to North East London now for an update on yesterday's horrific sword attack in which a 14-year-old boy was tragically killed. And let's speak to our reporter, Catherine Forster, who's at the site for the latest. Catherine, a tragic, horrific story that gripped the nation yesterday. Fresh detail emerging today, and now the 14-year-old boy, details emerging. Tell us more.
Yes, good afternoon, Martin. I was here all afternoon yesterday, and what really strikes me today is how little has changed. The cordons are still in exactly the same place where they are yesterday. Still a huge police presence, forensic teams still going over those streets behind me to the left-hand side, where that man wielding a sword roamed around for about 20 minutes, 22 minutes from the first call to the police actually bringing him down with tasers. Of course, he is in hospital, in custody. The police haven't been able to interview him yet. People going in and out to their houses, they're being allowed to do that now, obviously. Yesterday, you couldn't even do that, but police are taking everybody's names and addresses. But more details have emerged, and really, what are the odds? Because it transpires that the 14-year-old boy who tragically lost his life yesterday morning, just before 7 o'clock when he was just leaving for school, was heading to the same school that Grace O'Malley Kumar used to go to. That's Bancroft School, an independent school in Woodford Green, about 15 minutes from here. Grace O'Malley Kumar, of course, also lost her life, stabbed last year, coming home from a night out at Nottingham and trying to protect her friend Barnaby Webber. A really incredible and very sad coincidence. We've also learnt that the boy's mother is a science teacher at the Holy Family Catholic School in Waltham Forest. They sent an email to parents yesterday saying that a teacher's son had been taken from this life suddenly on his way to school. More details also emerging today about the condition of the 2 police officers still in hospital. Sir Mark Rowley, the Met Police boss, saying that the man had very severe injuries to his hand, but that the female police officer had come close to losing her hand, and in fact that a surgeon had spent many hours basically putting her arm back together. So really serious injuries, but they are hopeful that they will in time make a good recovery. A very heavy police presence here still, and really, you know, I was speaking to a man, quite a lot of flowers now being brought, some very moving tributes. One of them written on the card simply saying, "Fly high, little man, sorry, the community is broken." Farron Paul is an activist who works to try to work on knife crime in the capital. He was stabbed, and he's made this his sort of life's work. I talked to him a little bit earlier. Let's listen to what he had to say.
We need to put our foot down. We need to have a zero tolerance approach to knife crime and the people that use it. We need to have consequences that's going to be a bigger deterrent, and we also need to stop the buying and selling of weapons online. To this day, young people can order 21-inch samurais through the post, and they'll be delivered to people without ID. I believe across the country, everyone has their fair share of knife crime, but me, as a London resident, I know that we have a very, very bad problem with knife crime, and that is as a person of the community and also a person that runs an anti-knife charity.
Yeah, so him saying that he believes that knife crime is out of control. Talking to him a little bit later again, of course, this man yesterday had a sword, but the vast majority of knife crime, over 90%, is just carried out with kitchen knives. One of his suggestions is that manufacturers should be putting on serial knives onto knives so that, you know, when a kitchen knife is used, it could be tracked to the owner. Him basically saying all these various bans simply don't work, that you can buy all these illegal knives, get them shipped in, get them very easily over the internet. There seems to be a large number of police gathering to my left-hand side now. I'm not quite sure what's going on, but obviously we will bring you any further developments throughout the afternoon, Martin.
Thank you, Catherine Forser. I know you found this situation very moving, as have I, and that was a fine young man you spoke to there, really, with some great ideas. We need to get him on the show. I hope you got his details. Thank you very much, Catherine Forser, and of course we'll cross back to you live throughout the rest of the show. We'll have lots more on that story, of course, throughout the 3 hours coming, and there's plenty more on our website, gbnews.com, and you've helped to make it the fastest growing national news website in the country, so thank you very much. Now, summer is just around the corner, apparently, and we want to make it sizzle for you with an incredible £20,000 in cash up for grabs in the latest Great British Giveaway. It's our biggest cash prize to date, and it could be yours, and here's how you could be our winner.
We've blown the budget by giving you the chance to win a totally terrific £20,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now, you've been rightly telling me off for not reading out enough of your says. I've listened, and here we go. Sue Ryder says this on immigration. Strange how we are the most racist country on the planet, but anyone can come here without a passport and claim free healthcare, benefits and housing. On the same topic, Graham Kent says, take all the next boat arrivals straight to the airport for a flight to Rwanda. That would be the only deterrent they understand. We'll have plenty more of those throughout the show, and coming up, we'll be turning our attention to Scotland as a no-confidence vote in the government there gets underway. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Prince Harry, remember him? He appears to have fully turned his back on the UK as he listed his primary residence as the United States for the very first time in papers published yesterday. So interestingly, Harry listed the date on the formal US residency forms as the 29th of June 2023, last year. So that was the very same day he was kicked out of Frogmore Cottage in Great Windsor Park by his dad, the King. Charlotte, thank you for joining me. Okay. Are we just putting two and two together here with the significance of this date? Because there were stories during the rounds today that Harry chose that date specifically because he was so hurt about being booted out of Frogmore by his dad.
Yeah, I mean, to me it feels like he's trolling his dad a bit, because he could have said that he's been a US resident since 2020 when he quit the UK and moved to the States, but instead he chose the exact day that his dad kicked him out of Frogmore. But the reason his dad kicked him out of Frogmore was because he'd slagged off Camilla in Spare. And, you know, and his dad, apparently it was a really difficult decision for Charles, because, of course, no dad wants to kick their son out of their home. But he went beyond the pale. So Charles took the difficult decision to say, look, Frogmore's been empty for years anyway. We've spent £2.4 million doing it up for you. And now you've, you know, insulted our family in your book, Spare. Why is he so hung up on Frogmore? Because this is the country he was desperate to get away from. This is a house he didn't particularly want to live in and, in fact, didn't live in.
Well, he was forced, by the way, to pay £2.5 million to fund the renovations after it all kicked off. I mean, would that have anything to do with...
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that sort of galvanised his anger towards the whole situation. He thought he was getting a fantastic freebie. And there was, you know, there were a few reports at the time that Meghan actually thought she was moving into Frogmore House, which is a much grander property. And she sort of felt a bit sort of tricked or confused and hadn't quite realised it was actually a cottage, which is only a mere, I think it was only a mere 8 bedrooms.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Farage at 7. At 8, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg addresses the state of the nation. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 3:24. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now let's turn our attention to Scotland now, where the Scottish Parliament is currently holding a no-confidence debate. And it could see all ministers forced to resign if it passes, and it comes, of course, after First Minister Humza Yousaf resigned on Monday after the abrupt collapse of a power-sharing deal with the Greens. And that is that debate currently happening on your screens live, as you can see. Now let's go now to GB News Scotland reporter Tony Maguire, who is outside that debate at Holyrood. Tony, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. So it's crunch time. The big showdown is upon us. What do we expect will happen?
Good afternoon, Martin. Well, I think it's safe to say that the Scottish Government will probably scrape through today, but let's face it, it's always embarrassing having your dirty laundry aired, and that is exactly what we're going to hear for the next couple of hours at least. Now, Anas Sarwar, leader of Scottish Labour, he brought up this debate. He was the second vote of no confidence to be raised last week. The first, of course, from Douglas Ross, who had no confidence, and First Minister, now former First Minister, Humza Yousaf. But of course, he resigned from the post on Monday, and Douglas Ross withdrew that vote yesterday. So Anas Sarwar, his vote is going ahead today. Anas Sarwar and Scottish Labour, they've actually, I would say, been election ready for quite some time now, or so he has been campaigning on. But indeed, before the SNP certainly is ready to get into any kind of election, they're going to need a leader. And would you believe it, 2 days on, we still have no official nominations. Now, we've had some words with some politicians already today here at Holyrood. Kate Forbes made something of a bullet run through the press pack, saying very little whatsoever. John Swinney, though, obviously Nicola Sturgeon's former Deputy First Minister, he did take a very short amount of time to stop and talk to the press. Here's what he had to say.
I have to be very, very careful about my family circumstances, so I will not be rushed into making decisions that affect my loved ones. And it's a big step for me to take, so please give me the time.
Is it a standoff, Mr. Swinney?
Oh, it's not in any shape or form. I would describe that. It's about people taking the time to make the right decisions for those they love. Thank you very much.
Now, there's certainly quite a lot of, what we say, Western kind of trips going on today, and because it does feel a bit like a standoff, will Kate Forbes put herself forward? Will she represent this new era of Scottish National Party? Or will it be John Swinney who, you know, let's face it, would be the continuity candidate of a discontinued continuity candidate? But certainly all eyes at the minute on SNP, looking at their government's performance, and it'll be interesting to see how others vote, but it's expected, at least at this point, that the Greens will support the SNP in this one.
OK, thank you, Tony Maguire. Live outside Holyrood, and of course we'll cut back to that for the full action as it goes on. Now let's go live to Sheffield, where the police are giving a statement on that recent school stabbing.
My name is Dan Thorpe and I'm an Assistant Chief Constable at the South Yorkshire Police. I am joined here today by Victoria Hall, who is Head Teacher at Burley Academy. I'm going to provide a statement about today's incident, and then Victoria will deliver a statement as well. Due to the fact we have a suspect in custody and proceedings are active, I'm afraid we are not in a position to be able to take any questions afterwards. Thank you for your understanding. At 8:50 a.m. this morning, we were called to reports that 3 people had been injured during an incident at Burley Academy. Our officers attended the scene, and within minutes of the initial call, we had arrested a 17-year-old boy on suspicion of attempted murder. He remains in police custody. The 3 victims of this incident, 2 adults and a child, suffered minor injuries and were checked over at the scene by colleagues from Yorkshire Ambulance Service. The 2 adults both suffered minor injuries, one from a sharp object which is believed to be broken glass. The child was assaulted and thankfully has no visible injuries, but I know this will have been a frightening ordeal for everyone involved. I would like to take this opportunity to praise the Academy staff for the actions they took this morning to help keep the school community safe. We are working very closely with the Academy and our partners, and will continue to do so in the coming days and weeks. Burley is a close-knit community, and while these events concluded in a swift arrest, it will no doubt cause ongoing concern. Our officers will remain here in Burley for the rest of today and in the coming days. If you are worried, I would like to discuss what has happened, please do not hesitate to approach officers. We are here for you to make you feel safe in your local area. I am also aware of some unhelpful content circulating on social media relating to this incident. Please refrain from posting images, footage or speculation on social media, as this will be harmful to our investigation. Many thanks for your understanding and cooperation.
I just wanted to thank all of our students and staff who helped manage the situation this morning, and our staff who prioritise the safety and well-being of all of our students. I want to thank our students for their exemplary behaviour and all of the families and local community for their support. The school will be open tomorrow as usual, and we do look forward to seeing our students and families then. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that was a short press conference there regarding this stabbing at the Burley Academy in Sheffield. Police officer there, Dan Thorpe, confirming the suspect is in custody, so that's why no questions were taken. At 8:50 a.m. this morning, 3 were injured at the Burley Academy. A boy has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder, 2 adults and 1 child. Minor injuries from a sharp object, which they believe to be broken glass, not a knife. That's the latest intel. Police said a close-knit community. They were very shocked. Officers there to offer continued help, and identical to yesterday's stabbing in North East London. The police officer implored the public not to share social media content or to post content which may harm the investigation, which of course is ongoing. We'll have more details on that story as they emerge throughout the show. And there's lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including a new report claiming that colonialism wasn't why Britain became rich and powerful. Do you agree? But first, it's time for your latest news headlines, and it's Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. It's 3:31. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. In breaking news, a 14-year-old boy killed in a sword attack in Hainault yesterday has been named as Daniel Angerin. A 36-year-old man remains in custody after being arrested on suspicion of murder. Video captured the moment police used tasers against the suspect who was wielding a sword. He was hospitalised, and police say they've been unable to interview him due to his condition. The first migrants set to be deported to Rwanda have been detained. The Home Office says a series of operations took place across the country this week, with more due to be carried out in the coming weeks. Officials have not yet said how many people have been detained or where they were taken into custody. It comes ahead of the government's bid to get flights off the ground by July, after the Safety of Rwanda Act became law last week. A former Met police officer has been sentenced to life in prison for child rape and kidnap. 24-year-old Cliff Mitchell was convicted of 10 counts of rape, 3 counts of rape of a child under 13, 1 count of kidnap and breaching a non-molestation order. He was a serving PC in Hounslow when a number of offences were committed. He's been told he must serve a minimum of 14 years. GB News can reveal more than 1,700 migrants have crossed the English Channel in just over a week after several more boats were intercepted in UK waters today. A boatload of around 70 migrants was taken to Dover Harbour by lifeboat in the early hours of this morning. So far today, around 400 people have been taken to the Border Force Migrant Processing Centre. Official figures from yesterday reveal that 268 migrants arrived in the UK on 5 small boats. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2490 and €1.1687. The price of gold is £1,848 and 39 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 8,133 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Loads of you have been getting in touch via your say. Let's read a few of those out now. So earlier on in the show, Sue referred to Britain as the most racist country in the world, yet people still want to come here. I think she was being ironic, but Anne Levitt, I don't think, detected that. She said, most racist country in the world. How do you work that out? I don't think that's what the intention was. Christine Donoghue, very interesting point here. In 2012, I was a contractor at Hassler Detention Centre. At that time, illegals were offered this scheme to return home, except it was £5,000. That's cutbacks for you, because, of course, the returns deal to Rwanda, they're being offered £3,000 as a lump sum. Not bad money if you can get it, is it? Now, we've got lots more still to come, and in a few minutes, did British ingenuity alone make the country rich and prosperous back in the day, and not slavery? We'll get stuck into that debate next.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Some congestion on the northbound M1 this afternoon. Bedford 13 up to Milton Keynes Junction 14. Now, 2 lanes are coned off following an earlier vehicle fire causing queues. There's emergency repairs still on the M25, both sides of the carriageway. The inside lane shut, 7 Oaks at 5 to the Clackett Lane services. It's causing queues, particularly anti-clock. There was a breakdown earlier there as well. If you're heading towards Westminster and London, towards Trafalgar Square, we're seeing significant delays because of emergency repairs, and there was the changing of the guard earlier, so watch out for those delays. And Londonderry in Coleraine, the Milburn Road this afternoon, the A2 remains shut between Portrush Road, the A29 and Union Street. We've seen delays, and that's all due to a collision there this afternoon. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Leading motoring organisation has called for all new drivers to be banned from giving lifts to friends for 6 whole months after passing their tests.
Yes, the AA says around 5,000 people every year are killed and seriously injured in crashes involving at least one young motorist. Graduated driving licences introduced with limitations imposed on a period of time after a driver passes their test. So a 2-tier system.
Well, is this sensible or yet more ageism when it comes to regulating our habits in the United Kingdom? Let's speak to Quentin Wilson, a motoring journalist and transport campaigner. Really interested to get your thoughts on this, Quentin. There are a lot of people who instinctively will say this is state overreach. This is telling adults that they can't do something that they've done for generations. What's your view?
Well, look, the recent accident with the convertible Mini where people were twerking in the back, this is due to driver education. The person in control of that car really should have told the passengers just to buckle up and stay still. We're not teaching kids to drive properly. We expect them to do all this stuff below the dashboard, grinding of gears, hazard perception, positioning of car, in this very, very small time window, when we should be doing it from school age, teaching hazard perception. So I've been a patron of an organisation called Young Driver, who's delivered 1.4 million lessons to 11 to 17-year-olds on private land with ADI qualified instructors with dual controls. And the accident rate for that group is 4%. The national average is 20%. So look, we can do this, we can reduce these fatalities if we teach kids earlier about road safety.
Is this an issue, frankly, with teenage boys and showing off?
The testosterone does always seem to come through, doesn't it?
Welcome back, Warren Daubney on GB News here. We've got some breaking news for you, and the Scottish Government has survived the no-confidence vote today. They have survived the no-confidence vote, tabled, of course, by the Scottish Labour Party. That means that the SNP will carry on. There will not be an election, so anybody hoping for the downfall of the SNP today will be disappointed. That hasn't happened. We'll bring you more details on how that vote fell later in the show. We'll cross back to Tony Maguire, our man outside Holyrood. Just to repeat, if you're joining us, the Scottish Government has survived the no-confidence vote. Now, moving on. I'm delighted to say that the author of the report and editorial director of the Institute of Economic Affairs, Christian Nimitz, is alongside me in the studio because we're going to discuss the fact you've written a book and it's ruffled a few feathers. Your book ostensibly says, correct me if I'm wrong, that the slave trade didn't economically benefit Britain and it only benefited a tiny minority of people within Britain anyway, and you're not saying that the slave trade was a good thing, but it just economically wasn't worth it.
That's right, yes. That's exactly it. It's a pure cost-benefit analysis. Nobody's trying to whitewash the slave trade. Obviously, we all agree the slave trade was horrendous. I'm simply looking at the economics of it, at the profits that were made through this business, and I'm looking at it in relation to the total size of the British economy at the time. I'm asking, is it plausible that that could have financed or made a big contribution to financing Britain's domestic industrial revolution? And the short answer is no. The numbers are just not big enough. It made some families rich, but it didn't benefit the economy as a whole.
And Christian, another fascinating aspect of your book, by the way, Kemi Badenoch has endorsed your theory, and that is the British taxpayer was also burdened with a huge bill for this in terms of the military might, the infrastructure. So it actually cost the United Kingdom a huge amount.
The average citizen, yes, definitely. It was a redistribution from taxpayers and consumers to a few well-connected families, colonial entrepreneurs, people who were involved in the East India Company and slave labour plantations in the Caribbean. So it worked clearly for some people, for a relatively small number of families, and that's why we still see the legacy of that today. Some of the mansions are still around that were built with slave money, essentially. It clearly worked for those families, but as you said, that's only because they could outsource the cost to the general taxpayer and to consumers.
And, of course, you're not being flippant. You're purely looking at this in an economic outlook when you say the transatlantic slave trade was no more important for the British economy than brewing or sheep farming. But we do not usually hear the claim that brewing financed the Industrial Revolution.
Yes, you could make the same claim about any of those sectors because they were in terms of their importance to the British economy, they were roughly similar. In that sense, yes, you could say, OK, it may have made a small contribution, but then you could say that about pretty much any sector.
And do you think, therefore, the debate around it is only because of slavery that Britain ruled the Industrial Revolution is simplistic and misses the point that actually innovation, technology and organisational prowess was the driving force?
Yes, I think that is also the point that Kemi Badenoch made, that there is a danger that if... that's why this matters today. Otherwise, you could say, well, who cares? This happened 200 years ago. But if we misinterpret the causes of the Industrial Revolution, the causes of wealth, the cause of why some countries, why the Western world grew rich, if we misinterpret that, that is going to lead to some bad policy conclusions. If we fall for this misunderstanding that the West didn't actually get anything right, it just plundered the rest of the world, then, well, that's going to lead you to a zero-sum mindset, and then you neglect the actual causes of wealth, which are good institutions, simply good economic policies, rule of law, protection of property rights.
Excellent. And if people want to read your book, get hold of it, what's it called and where can they find it?
It's called Imperial Measurement, a cost-benefit analysis of Western colonialism, and they can find it on the website of the Institute of Economic Affairs.
Superb stuff, and that's Christian Nimitz. Thank you for joining us from the Institute of Economic Affairs. Well, for a counterpoint on that, let's get the view now of the political commentator and activist Femi Nylander. Femi, welcome to the show. You may have overheard our previous guest there, Christian Niemiec, saying slavery only benefited a tiny minority of British individuals, a small number of families. The economic cost to the entire nation was massive, and it simply economically wasn't worth it. What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, a lot of what he said didn't really hold water, but he did make a fair point insofar as he said that a lot of the benefits from slavery did go to the upper classes in the UK. And we know until 2015, the British taxpayer was paying reparations to people like Richard Drax, the Conservative MP, whose family benefited massively from slavery and were paid off at the end of the slave trade. So reparations have been paid. Britain is fine with reparations. Until 2015, we were paying reparations, but we were paying it to the slave owners. The reality, of course, though, is that it's not correct to say that a large part, a very significant part of Britain's wealth is based on slavery and colonialism. I mean, when we talk about the links between slavery and the Industrial Revolution, it happens in two ways, and colonialism and Industrial Revolution as well. So the Industrial Revolution basically allows for the creation of technology in the arms trade and weapons, which continue to allow the UK to then go out and dominate and plunder and basically take over other lands. So there's the link to the arms trade and the link to the development of arms and the development of technology. When we look at Europe, when we look at the Industrial Revolution, we look at the use of dynamite and guns and stuff, that's very clearly linked, and that's very clearly a way in which Europe was allowed and the UK were able to exert their dominance over other parts of the planet. But then, of course, you have the reality that the slave labor that was providing the sugar, that was providing the cotton. When we learn in schools about the cotton mills of Manchester, I grew up in Manchester, not close to Wigan. In school, I went to visit Wigan, and we went to visit these cotton mills. We don't learn about where the cotton came from. Like these raw materials that were taken up by slaves then contribute to the industrialization of the British economy. And so, yes, there are a few very, very wealthy individuals who get very, very wealthy as well. But a large part of what allows the UK to become a very wealthy country is the slave trade and the colonialism as well.
One more question for you, Femi. If we can agree then that a small minority, a tiny minority of wealthy families benefited, and yet the taxpayer as a whole footed those reparation bills, doesn't it knock the notion of further reparations into a cocked hat? Why should millions of people who had no link to slavery whatsoever be expected to foot any future bill?
Well, I mean, do you understand how tax works in this country? The wealthiest people in the country pay more tax than the poorer people. If you earn less than a certain amount, you're not going to pay any tax. And so the poorest people in this country, if the reparations bill comes out of a general pot, of the UK pot, right? And I'm all for saying to Richard Drax, the first person to pay reparations should be you. Why don't we get the UK state to say, okay, instead of asking the public purse to pay, let's seize Richard Drax's assets as one of the wealthiest MPs in Parliament, whose entire net worth is based upon colonial history, and who was trying to sell his plantation in Barbados, the plantation he inherited.
What about people who've got no links? What about people who've got no links whatsoever to slavery?
Would you agree with that then, Martin? Would you agree with that? Would you agree with seizing Richard Drax's assets and using that money to repay the victims of the descendants of the victims of slavery instead of the public purse?
No, I wouldn't. Not without a full.
You're making a
Not without a full analysis, Femi, of where that money came from.
We know where Richard Drax's money comes from.
That would be a matter of him to decide, or a court of law. What I'm talking about is a broader societal.
You do not
Femi,
agree
please.
with paying back reparations.
I don't agree with the majority of taxpayers paying back reparations, because my point is quite simple. The vast majority of people in the United Kingdom had nothing to do with the slave trade whatsoever. Femi, this doesn't work if we just talk over each other.
Okay.
The vast majority of people in the UK had absolutely nothing to do with slavery, and therefore, why should they be made to pay any future reparations? That's my point. Do you agree with that?
No, I think that, as I say, slavery both benefited the UK as a whole, as a country, definitely, but also benefited a few people in the ruling class of the UK more than other people. And I think that if you're going to be consistent in what you're saying, then what you should be doing right now is saying Richard Drax especially should be paying reparations. And if you think that the UK taxpayer shouldn't, then say who should. Say where this money has gone to, who has received this money, and who should be paying it back.
But do you agree, just briefly, that people like me, coal miners' sons, people from the coal mining communities, with no links, in fact, our families, you could argue, were enslaved for generations by the feudal barons, digging canals, putting up walls. No, we were treated like slaves. Do you think that those people with nothing to do with slavery at all should pay a single penny in reparations? Yes or no?
But the thing is, no one is asking them to. People are saying the UK should pay reparations. People who are from working class backgrounds pay less tax. That's how progressive taxation.
So you won't give me an answer.
And
okay.
So if the UK pays reparations, no, but what you're putting a false dichotomy. No one is saying that a poor person on a council estate should put their hands in their pocket and pay the same as Richard Drax. People are saying that the UK as a whole.
I'm not saying pay the same. I'm saying pay anything. Look, Femi Lander, we have to leave it there. Thank you for your opinion. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. I appreciate it. Seriously, I do.
Thank you.
Now back soon with today's brilliant panel discussing what on earth is going on with over the pond with these stupid student protests in California. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a cloudy day for many of us with a few showers around, but heavier, more persistent and potentially thundery rain arrives from the near continent overnight. An old frontal system becomes reactivated as humid air arrives from Central Europe, and that's going to lead to some outbreaks of rain through the evening across the Midlands, central southern England, Wales, Northern Ireland, perhaps southwest Scotland. And then by midnight, thundery showers arrive from the continent. Hit and miss downpours, but these could be lively if they occur across central southern England into the Midlands and mid-Wales by the morning. Frequent lightning, hail, torrential downpours. So really it's across the southern third of the UK where we could see some heavy rain as we start off Thursday, persistent wet weather for Wales and the southwest, thundery showers elsewhere, much drier and calmer for Northern Ireland, Northern England, Scotland. Some decent sunny spells in places, particularly for central and western Scotland. And feeling warm here with the sunshine, up to 21 or even 22 Celsius, perhaps 23 in one or two very warm spots. Also warm for Northern Ireland through the Midlands, but cold on the North Sea coast with the breeze coming from the North Sea, a lot of low cloud. That continues into Friday. And on Friday, we're going to see the best of the sunshine in the north of Scotland as well as the south of England, in between cloud and outbreaks of rain. Saturday sees further rain arrive from the south and rain or showers on Sunday.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from tomorrow,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections, we'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from tomorrow at midnight on GB News.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News. The
People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 3:52. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now, I'm joined in the studio now by the broadcaster and lawyer Andrew Eborn and the political commentator and trade unionist Andy MacDonald. Welcome to the studio, chaps, my all-male panel, my manel. Let's start with you. Today, we've seen another school stabbing, this time in Sheffield. A couple of weeks ago, we saw one in Wales. Teenagers taking sharp objects into schools. Is this the beginning of a worrying trend?
I think so. You know, over the last
10 years, we've seen a slightly ramping trend of violence in schools, whether it's peer on peer or peer on teacher. And I think we haven't got a government that's taking this seriously, honestly. We've had 5 Home Secretaries in 5 years. Clearly, the government are not taking domestic security safely enough. We need someone, whether it's the police, the regional police forces, regional councils, or the government itself, to take a stand to put into place some policies that will stop this violence in schools.
And Andrew Eborn, what might that policy look like? What do we need to do to stamp this out?
We need to be incredibly firm on this. I mean, it's absolutely appalling what happens. Every death, every injury is a scandal. And I think the more that we can sort of turn around and address that. What I liked in particular, though, was the quick CCTV footage, for example, with the guy with the sword and how quickly we're capturing those sort of stuff. The police need to respond very, very quickly and very, very firmly, and that will give the message.
But Andy, on schools, what does that look like? Metal detectors? They do that in America with guns.
I think maybe some level of bag searching where there is a reason to, maybe people, teachers keeping an eye on social media, potential threats on places like Snapchat or Instagram where students communicate to each other, just being more vigilant and just taking it more seriously on social media, making sure that there is that kind of digital awareness from teachers onto what students are doing.
And Andrew Eborn, there is this feeling that we've simply relaxed too much on stop and search. We're not putting people in prison for possession of a knife. And we've got to get much, much tougher, irrespective of the age.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting tough, as I say, is key. People got to see. The other thing we need is role models. We need positive role models. All the people at the moment are being preached about hate. And as soon as you sort of turn around and glorify some of these appalling acts, that's where the issue is. There's a wider societal impact, which has to be positive role models. That's what we should encourage.
Yeah, Catherine Forster was on the streets of North East London at the site of that stabbing yesterday. Spoke to a wonderful young man with some great ideas. I hope to get him on the show. He's been stabbed in our campaigns against it. The Andys, thank you very much. We'll see you in the next hour. Short and sweet. Coming up in that next hour, we'll bring the latest on that shocking Sheffield school stabbing, as well as the London sword attack yesterday, where a 14-year-old boy tragically died. What exactly is going on? Please keep sending in your says. I'll read out as many as I can before the end of the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel. Now it's your weather, and it's Aidan McGibbon.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a cloudy day for many of us with a few showers around, but heavier, more persistent and potentially thundery rain arrives from the near continent overnight. An old frontal system becomes reactivated as humid air arrives from Central Europe, and that's going to lead to some outbreaks of rain through the evening across the Midlands, central southern England, Wales, Northern Ireland, perhaps southwest Scotland. And then by midnight, thundery showers arrive from the continent. Hit and miss downpours, but these could be lively if they occur across central southern England into the Midlands and mid-Wales by the morning. Frequent lightning, hail, torrential downpours. So really it's across the southern third of the UK where we could see some heavy rain as we start off Thursday, persistent wet weather for Wales and the southwest, thundery showers elsewhere, much drier and calmer for Northern Ireland, Northern England, Scotland. Some decent sunny spells in places, particularly for central and western Scotland. And feeling warm here with the sunshine, up to 21 or even 22 Celsius, perhaps 23 in one or two very warm spots. Also warm for Northern Ireland through the Midlands, but cold on the North Sea coast with the breeze coming from the North Sea, a lot of low cloud. That continues into Friday. And on Friday, we're going to see the best of the sunshine in the north of Scotland as well as the south of England, in between cloud and outbreaks of rain. Saturday sees further rain arrive from the south and rain or showers on Sunday.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. The A5 westbound currently closed between the M6 toll, that's junction T5 in Lichfield through towards Muckley Corner. Now it's queuing at the scene of a collision there. Delays for the northbound M6 at Spaghetti Junction, junction 6. 2 or 3 lanes coned off for a broken down van, queuing back towards the M42 interchange at 4A. Now the northbound M1 at Bedford 13 queuing back towards 11A. Currently a lane shut at the scene there of a collision. London and Canning Canning Town, the East India Dock Road eastbound A13, a block just after the Canning Town flyover and queuing. That's at the scene of a collision. And Londonderry, Coleraine, the Milburn Road, the A2, that remains closed, is shut both ways between the Portrush Road for the A29 and Union Street and queuing due to a collision. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
We've blown the budget by giving you the chance to win a totally terrific £20,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Nana Acquia. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hey, very good afternoon to you. It's 4 o'clock and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. Coming up on today's show, raids are underway to detain the first migrants to be deported to Rwanda. Is Rishi Sunak's Stop the Boats policy finally working, or is this just a government PR stunt ahead of tomorrow's local elections? And it comes as more than 1,700 migrants cross the English Channel in small boats in just over 1 week. Is the scale of the problem simply getting unmanageable? And the 14-year-old boy tragically killed in yesterday's sword attack in Hainault has been named as Daniel Anjorin. His school has paid tribute to a much-loved pupil. And in another stabbing attack, 3 people have been injured and a 17-year-old arrested for attempted murder at a school in Sheffield. That's all coming up in your next hour. Thanks for joining me on the show. Always a delight to have your company. So, we've finally got a solitary single human off the ground and to Rwanda. The catch is they volunteered. They not only volunteered, they were paid. £3,000 of your money is what they got, plus they'll be guaranteed free food, free lodgings for 5 years in Rwanda and the guarantee of a job. Not bad, is it? Not bad. Wouldn't you like a bit of that? How many people out there would like to be relocated, I don't know, to Spain or France or wherever with £3,000 to spend in your back pocket, plus a free house, free food and the guarantee of a job? Do you ever wonder whose side is this government on? I want to hear from you. I've been reading out as many of your says as I can, and I will continue to do so. So please send them in. You go to gbnews.com/your say. But now it's time for your latest news headlines, and it's Ray Addison.
Thanks, Martin. Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 4. Our top stories this afternoon. The 14-year-old boy killed in a sword attack in north-east London yesterday has now been named as Daniel Angerin. The Met Police says a 36-year-old man remains in custody on suspicion of the teenager's murder. Daniel was a pupil at Bancrofts, the same school in East London, attended by Grace O'Malley Kumar, who was murdered in a knife attack in Nottingham last summer. 4 other people were injured during yesterday's attack. Met Police Chief Sir Mark Rowley told LBC a female officer came close to losing her hand.
We were on the ground in 12 minutes. And he was detained after 22 minutes. Obviously, some of the first contacts led to officers being very severely injured. I went to the hospital yesterday and to see the officers and their families. I saw the inspector whose hand's badly damaged, and I was talking to the family and colleagues of the officer, woman officer who's really badly damaged arm, really seriously damaged, and the surgeon spent sort of many hours sort of basically putting her arm back together.
Police believe a piece of glass may have been used as a weapon during an incident at a school in Sheffield. A 17-year-old boy has been arrested for attempted murder after 3 people were hurt at the Burley Academy this morning. 2 adults suffered minor injuries and a child who was assaulted had no visible injuries. Assistant Chief Constable Dan Thorpe praised the actions of school staff in what he says would have been a frightening ordeal.
Burley is a close-knit community, and while these events concluded in a swift arrest, it will no doubt cause ongoing concern. Our officers will remain here in Burley for the rest of today and in the coming days. If you are worried, I would like to discuss what has happened, please do not hesitate to approach officers. We are here for you to make you feel safe in your local area.
Scotland's SNP government has survived a confidence vote at the Scottish Parliament. The leader of Scottish Labour, Anwas Sarwar, tabled the motion after a power-sharing deal between the SNP and the Greens collapsed. It comes after First Minister Humza Yousaf resigned on Monday. Now, the first migrants set to be deported to Rwanda have been detained today. The Home Office says a series of operations took place across the country this week, with more due to be carried out in the coming days. Officials won't confirm how many have been detained or where they were taken into custody. It comes ahead of the government's bid to get flights off the ground by July, after the Safety of Rwanda Act became law last week. Well, meanwhile, more than 1,700 small boat migrants have crossed the English Channel in just over a week, GB News can reveal, after several more boats were intercepted in UK waters today. A boatload of around 70 migrants was taken to Dover Harbour by lifeboat in the early hours of this morning. So far today, around 400 people have been taken to the Border Force Migrant Processing Centre. Official figures for yesterday reveal that 268 migrants arrived in the UK on 5 small boats. Police have arrested 3 people during a pro-Palestinian protest outside a government building in central London. Hundreds of demonstrators held a rally outside the Department for Business and Trade. Organisers say workers and trade unionists also held protests outside of BAE Systems sites to show solidarity with Palestinian workers. Violent clashes have erupted on the campus of the University of California in Los Angeles between pro-Palestinian protesters and a group of counter-demonstrators. Riot police had to break up crowds this morning. Comes hours after New York City police arrested approximately 300 pro-Palestinian demonstrators occupying a building on Columbia University campus in New York. Speaking a short while ago, New York City Mayor Eric Adams said the protest was not led by students.
Well, those who broke into the building did include students. It was led by individuals who are not affiliated with the university. The school needed the NYPD's assistance to clear Hamilton Hall and the encampments outside. And we said from the beginning that students have a right to protest, and free speech is the cornerstone of our society. But as our major concern, we knew and we saw that there were those who were never concerned about free speech. They were concerned about chaos.
Well, for the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, straight back to Martin.
Thank you, Ray. Now, we've got absolutely loads to get through this hour. I'm going to start with some huge developments regarding the government's flagship policy to try to stop the boats. And the first migrants set to be deported to Rwanda have now been detained. You can see on your screen there pictures of that, because the Home Office said a series of operations took place across the country this week, some police raids. And meanwhile, GB News can reveal that more than 1,700 migrants crossed the English Channel on small boats in just over 1 week alone. And there's been a new developments in that story too. I'm joined now by GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, 1,700 in just a week, and we've only got one person off to Rwanda, and he went of his own accord.
Yes, well, the 1,700 figure, I think, just goes to show how badly, as far as the government is concerned, this Rwanda deterrent is needed. And as part of that, we have now entered this phase of detaining asylum seekers who've come across the English Channel, not ones that have come today, but ones who are part of an original cohort of 5,700 asylum seekers who were notified a year ago that they had been earmarked for deportation to Rwanda, but of course it all got bogged down in the courts and that was delayed. Now the government belatedly is moving in to start detaining those individuals again. And GB News can reveal that 800 immigration enforcement officers are involved in this proactive operation that began on Monday and is continuing. 800 officers right across the country. They are arresting or at least detaining those asylum seekers who are turning up for the regular scheduled appointments. Those who are less compliant and have not been turning up for appointments, they are going to home addresses, as you saw on the images there, and those people are being detained at these addresses. This operation, Martin, we can also reveal, has been codenamed Operation Vector by the Home Office. It will continue until they have enough in the way of asylum seekers to fill that first flight. Then things will slow down a bit until they get that first flight off the ground. They're expecting that first flight will take off between 9 and 11 weeks from now, providing there are no more hold-ups in the courts. And that, of course, as we well know, having seen it time and time again, is certainly a possibility. We can also reveal, Martin, that in terms of those who have been detained so far, they are from that group, as I say, from January 2022 through to June of last year, migrants who arrived across the English Channel illegally in small boats. Now, the sources that we've been speaking to are not able to confirm whether any of the original cohort that were on that flight a year ago that never got off the ground, whether they are now amongst those who have been rounded up. But they are being held, Martin, we're told, in detention at the moment. However, they say that their legal teams can make representations and seek to bail them. So you may have this absolutely extraordinary, I think, and bizarre situation where 5,700 asylum seekers who are currently on bail, having been notified originally that they are going to be deported to Rwanda, are detained and then are allowed out on bail again, potentially disappearing. Well, the Home Office say that they are confident that anyone that doesn't report, they will be able to locate and carry out enforcement to ensure that those individuals are rounded up and deported in the fullness of time.
Mark White, an astonishing development. Operation Vector, 800 immigration officers involved, as you say, across the country. 5,700 on bail, 3,500 missing, 1,700 arrivals in just 1 week. Mark White, the big question is, will it be enough? Superb as ever. Thank you for joining us. Mark White. And joining me now to discuss this further is UK immigration lawyer Harjap Singh Bengal. Welcome to the show, Harjap. You may have overheard that they're tough talking, coincidentally, on the eve of local elections. Operation Vector, 800 immigration officers involved across the country to apprehend and process, 5,700 on bail. The simple question is, Harjap, is this just a drop in the ocean? Is it performative? Will it do anything?
Well, we know one thing for certain, that it's definitely not a deterrent. So this weekend, it hasn't deterred anybody coming over. We've seen record numbers come over again last week. So it's not acting as a deterrent. It's not locking up the gangs. The gangs are still getting paid. They don't care whether people go to Rwanda or not. We've had one voluntary return. Turns out, according to an alleged report in the Times, that person was going back anyway. And guess where he was going back to work in? Rwanda. So essentially, he got a free ticket and $3,000 to help him on his way. I don't think this is really acting as a deterrent, despite what the government do. And you're a good old skeptic like me, Martin. On the eve of an election, elections tomorrow, all of a sudden they've discovered 800 officers, 150 courts and judges to process cases, whereas they've had backlogs for the last 10, 12 odd years. It does seem very, very fishy. And the fact is, the numbers aren't going down. Detaining people, like your editor just said, detaining people to what? Release them again? Well, I mean, what is that? To show, before an election, we've arrested 800 people, but by Friday, they could have released 750 or 800 of them people. The proof is going to be in the numbers and see if the numbers actually go down and the gangs are actually stopped, which till this day, till this minute, to this hour, to this second, has not happened.
And indeed, many of them might just clear off to Ireland, Harjap Singh Bengal, because they won't send them back to Rwanda. The big question is, you know exactly as sure as night follows day, when it comes to the actual enforced deportation, not the voluntary, here's $3,000, off you go, my old son, have a nice time departures, but the actual enforced departures, the NGOs, the charities, the lawyers, the establishment will step up and they'll do everything they can, won't they, to ensure no flights get off the ground.
Well, enforced removals have been going down since 2010. So they've been going down from tens of thousands to almost in 2019 and 20 to about 2,000, even in them sort of numbers. That doesn't really have anything to do with the lawyers and judges. That is something because lawyers and judges have been around in 2009 when they were enforced removing about 15,000 people. They didn't stop the people being sent back then. That's probably maybe to do something with the political will of the government and the fact that the government needs immigration to be a hot topic in the elections, because it's one of the things that it's promised in its manifesto, one of the things that it was supposed to deliver X amount of years ago, but hasn't done. And it's one of the things that people are upset about. So to keep immigration in the limelight, to keep it active, if we stop immigrants coming here, if we stop the small boats coming here, what is this government going to campaign on? It's not its NHS record. It's not the record with the teachers that it's got. It's not the record with its minimum wages. It's not the record with its taxing big billionaires and stopping companies saving money offshore. It's not that at all. So the only thing the government has got a political football to kick around is immigration. It needs the numbers to be like this in order they can have something to talk about at the election.
Harjap Singh Bengal, a dish always served with a healthy dollop of cynicism. Thank you very much for joining me on the show. It's always an absolute pleasure. You take care. Now, news coming in the last hour. And the 14-year-old boy who was killed in the Hainault sword attack yesterday has been named as Daniel Angerin. Let's cross over now to GB News' reporter Catherine Forster, who's at the scene with all of the latest. Catherine, the news that every parent dreads, and now the child has been named. What's the latest?
Yes, good afternoon, Martin. I'm really struck, having been here yesterday, how little has changed at the scene. We've still got this huge area behind me, cordoned off, massive police presence, and people now queuing just over to my left-hand side to be allowed back into their homes. Basically, they're only allowed in if they live in these streets. They have to give their name and address. The police are logging everybody who comes in and out of what's still very actively a crime scene. But yes, in the last hour, we've had the name of this 14-year-old boy tragically killed yesterday morning, shortly after 7 o'clock in the morning. Daniel Angerin, he was a pupil at Bancroft School, an independent school in Woodford Green, the same school, incredibly, that Grace O'Malley Kumar had previously attended. She, of course, was killed in a knife attack in Nottingham last summer. The school have said that he was a true scholar, that he had a positive nature and gentle character. We know too that his mother is a science teacher at another school, the Holy Family Catholic School in Waltham Forest. They sent a message to parents saying that Mrs. Angerin's son had been taken from this life suddenly on the way to school. There's lots of people bringing flowers here, really very moving messages. We've also had an update on the other people that we were injured yesterday. The male police officer, bad injuries to his hands. The female police officer, horrific injuries to her arm. We're told that she could very well have lost her hand, but that a surgeon had spent many, many hours basically putting her arm back together. We've also, in a statement from the Deputy Chief Inspector Larry Smith, who's leading this investigation, learnt some more details about the two members of the public that were injured that we didn't have until now. A 33-year-old man, he was struck at the beginning of this attack. The man who is in custody crashed a van into a property and hit this man and then attacked him, stabbing him in the neck. And then subsequently a 35-year-old man, lacerations to his arm. He was attacked in a nearby property. We're then told that the man in custody the police arrived within 10 minutes. They tried to control him, bring him down with a taser. That first attempt was unsuccessful, but then later more police officers managed to bring him under control and take him into custody. We've also heard that 19 officers a day are injured in London. The Metropolitan Police get a lot of criticism around the protests and other things, but they really do walk towards danger. I was also talking to a gentleman that came here with flowers. He works in the area of knife crime, trying to change children's perspective and lives. He was a victim of knife crime. He survived and he's now campaigning. Let's just have a look at what he had to say.
We need to put our foot down. We need to have a zero tolerance approach to knife crime and the people that use it. We need to have consequences that's going to be a bigger deterrent, and we also need to stop the buying and selling of weapons online. To this day, young people can order 21-inch samurais through the post and they'll be delivered to people without ID. I believe across the country, everyone has their fair share of knife crime, but me, as a London resident, I know that we have a very, very bad problem with knife crime. And that is as a person of the community and also a person that runs the anti-knife charity.
Yeah, so he really feels that knife crime is out of control, and it really does feel like this is a very quiet corner of north-east London. People's lives have been radically changed and one family's life in absolute tatters. Back to you, Martin.
Catherine Forster, thank you for that very moving report from north-east London. Appreciate your time. Now, we're back in a few minutes and we'll head to Scotland, where the SNP has survived a no-confidence vote. We'll have all the details. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
I don't think you can go and watch a Shakespeare play unless you already know it. It's almost like you have to understand the story and the characters, and perhaps have even done a bit of reading into it. Because if you went completely blind, especially in today's world where we don't speak in that kind of way. It is, I think, probably a bit alienating.
But Dawn is saying it is alienating at the moment because of the lack of representation.
You know what, the actual phrasing they use, right, OK, the disproportionate representation propagated white, able-bodied, heterosexual, cisgender male narratives. I'm sure there's people sitting in a room going, what's the most ridiculous thing we can come up with today?
Yes.
But really, just chuck all these words at it, cisgender, and it's just insane. Of course, Shakespeare was what it was back in the day, and that's why it's mostly blokes and they're mostly white.
And lots of speculation that he was actually gay, isn't there? Because he never really saw Anne Hathaway very often and stayed away a lot of the time. I don't know, maybe he was a big
He might have
gay
been
icon.
transgender for all I know. I mean, I don't...
Biggins, I'm looking at you.
No, I think you're right. I mean, you know, I think that goes for the profession too. I mean, I do think I mean, I remember seeing Macbeth in London with Judi Dench and Ian McKellen, and it was one of the most exciting evenings ever. And it was a cold night at the Donmar Theatre, outside and inside, and that gave it atmosphere. There are certain things, and then you go along and see something else, and you think, I'll walk out in the interval.
Yeah. Macbeth is a sexy play, though.
Let's talk about, there's so many. Can I live to be 100?
Oh, this is depressing.
I think it is depressing. I like to stay here now. I don't want to live to 100.
Oh, don't say that.
I'm right behind you.
I don't even want to. My father died at 63. That'll be me gone this year.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Farage at 7. At 8, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg addresses the state of the nation. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:24. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now let's turn our attention to Scotland now, where the SNP have survived a dramatic no-confidence vote. The leader of Scottish Labour, Anna Sarwar, tabled the motion after a power-sharing deal between the SNP and the Green Party collapsed. But it seems now that the gamble hasn't paid off. Well, let's cut now to GB News' Scotland reporter Tony Maguire, who's at Holyrood. Tony, welcome to the show. So the SNP survived to fight on. What's the latest?
Yeah, good afternoon. Well, certainly it's sort of as we expected. The SNP have survived. Obviously, Humza Yousaf still is head of the party, but even though the Greens, it looks like, did side with the Scottish Nationalist Party at this time, certainly a lot is still looking uncertain in the weeks ahead for the party. Now, we saw some kind of comical interactions almost with one of the candidates to replace Humza Yousaf, John Swinney, and Douglas Ross, leader of Scottish Conservatives, with some nickname calling with Honest John and Not So Honest John, and then Douglas Ross getting something of a repeated scolding from the presiding officer, Alison Johnson. Anna Sarwar, obviously, he brought this motion, and had he been successful, then we would be barrelling towards a Scottish election right now. But certainly, if we're speaking frankly, I'm not too sure how many of Scotland's parties are actually prepared for an election, knowing full-heartedly that a general election for Westminster seats is just around the corner. Now, Douglas Ross also had some chipper words to say about Kate Forbes. Well, certainly potentially going to be standing against John Swinney if indeed John Swinney runs. For sure right now we don't know about either of their intentions, but certainly calling on Kate Forbes as an even more stout nationalist than Nicola Sturgeon. Well, isn't that quite something? But certainly, as we discussed earlier, again, it's a bit of a Mexican standoff. We don't know whether the old guard and John Swinney is going to put his name forward. He's still said this afternoon he's considering his family very much at the forefront of his decision making. Kate Forbes much in the same, not giving any time to the press today to give any indication of her intentions. Still considering, lots of mulling, lots of considering, and still an SNP government here at Holyrood this afternoon.
OK, Tony Maguire live from Holyrood. The SNP survives for now. Thank you as ever. Now, the people of Blackpool South will head to the polls tomorrow after the resignation of their former MP triggered a by-election. And our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper paid the area a visit to find out more.
The world-famous Blackpool Promenade. Once upon a time, people flocked from all over the globe to visit this iconic seaside resort. But in recent years, the town has gained a rather different reputation. In fact, the most recent government figures place 8 of the 10 most deprived neighbourhoods in the country here in Blackpool.
Have you enjoyed your stay?
The Royal Boston Hotel first opened its doors back in 1934. Since then, the promenade has completely changed, and not necessarily for the better.
Blackpool can be beautiful, it can be wonderful, but it also can look very run down when you drive up and down the promenade. So it needs investment, and I think there's people willing to invest, but it's just unlocking that key around how we can do that and how we can actually change those buildings and that structure.
Tomorrow, the people of Blackpool South will head to the polls to choose their new MP. For John, the successful candidate needs to secure the town's future by making decisions now.
A huge part of what the MP is going to need to do is to create that job and those opportunities and work with local businesses to create that opportunity. Because we see, and I see, a huge amount of talent leaving Blackpool. They're the ambassadors for the town, they're the future of Blackpool.
Here at the heart of Blackpool's tourist economy, its tower still stands, its illuminations still shine. And yet now, for its people, they feel it's time for change. Blackpool South's about to get a new MP. What do you want them to do for Blackpool?
To invest more money in the mental health services around Blackpool, because there isn't much to offer for young people.
They need to invest more money in the people of Blackpool rather than the tourist areas.
Make it safer, make it a better community, especially with the cost of living crisis.
Do more for Blackpool residents, more for the homeless, which they don't actually do. They place them into hotels, leave them for 3 months, and if they don't find a place within them 3 months, they're moved. I'm one of them people.
I think it's quite sad, actually.
Yes.
It's very sad, because Blackpool was massive.
A once glittering tourist trap, the Blackpool of today seems to have lost some of its sparkle. And for its local people, they can only hope their new MP can restore the town to happier days. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
And the full list of candidates standing in the Blackpool South by-election are Stephen Black, Independent, Mark Butcher, Reform UK, Andrew Cregan, Lib Dems, Howling Lord Hope, Official Monster Raving Loony Party, David Jones, Conservatives, Kim Knight, Alliance for Freedom and Democracy, Damon Sharp, New Open Non-Political Organised Leadership Party, Ben Thomas, Green Party, and Chris Webb, Labour Party. Blackpool, of course, is ranked as the most deprived local authority in England on 7 areas, including income, health, local concentration, and the percentage of people employed and who are deprived. Symptomatic, I believe, of a broken, forgotten Britain. End of the line, forgotten. Cheap housing means been overwhelmed by the unemployed, by the low paid, and of course, more recently, Serco has hoovered up properties and dumped asylum seekers on places like Blackpool. Communities crying out for change. Let's see if they get it. Now, lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, including looking at the incredible footage of Irish police dismantling Dublin's migrant-tented city. But first, it's your latest news headlines with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Martin. Good afternoon. It's 4:31, our top stories. The 14-year-old boy killed in a sword attack in north-east London yesterday has now been named as Daniel Angerin. The Met Police says a 36-year-old man remains in custody on suspicion of the teenager's murder. Daniel was a pupil at Bancrofts. That's the same school in East London, which was attended by Grace O'Malley Kumar, who was murdered in a knife attack in Nottingham last summer. 4 other people were injured during yesterday's attack. Police believe a piece of glass may have been used as a weapon during an incident at a school in Sheffield. The 17-year-old boy has been arrested for attempted murder after 3 people were hurt at the Burley Academy this morning. 2 adults suffered minor injuries and a child who was assaulted had no visible injuries. Well, Scotland's SNP government has survived a confidence vote at the Scottish Parliament. The leader of Scottish Labour, Anas Sarwar, tabled the motion after a power-sharing deal between the SNP and the Greens collapsed. The motion was defeated by 70 votes to 58. It comes after the resignation of First Minister Humza Yousaf on Monday. The first migrants set to be deported to Rwanda have been detained. The Home Office says a series of operations took place across the country this week, with more due to be carried out soon. Officials won't confirm how many people have been detained or where they were taken into custody. It comes ahead of the government's bid to get flights off the ground by July after the Safety of Rwanda Act became law last week. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
The latest GB News travel.
Hi, good afternoon to you. I'm Jules Buckley. Northbound M6 struggling towards Spaghetti Junction. That is Junction 6. Now queues back towards the M42 at 4A following an earlier broken down van. All the lanes are back open. Still some congestion too heading further north from Sandbach 17 to Middlewich 18. Again, all lanes back open following an earlier collision. Now in Warwickshire, the northbound M40 before the M42 interchange, there's a breakdown blocking lane 1 of 3. That naturally is causing some delays, and slow going for the northbound M1 just around Bedford at 13. Queues at the moment around about junction 11A on the cameras. There's been a collision, a lane closure in place, of course, in the roadworks. Slow back towards the Toddington services there at the moment. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Offline and overlooked. That's what Age UK say millions of British pensioners are. Why? Because they cannot or won't access the internet. It's leading to digital exclusion. So the charities campaigning for public services like banks, utilities and even the NHS to maintain a more human approach.
Everything's online. People assume you've got a smartphone with a mobile number and an email, and without that you don't exist in this world anymore. We've got to try and get the government to see that it's so important to make people feel that they belong, because there's a feeling that the older generation just feel that they're forgotten, they're in the way. And we already know that anyway, but it's just another reason for them to feel that they're not wanted. They'll just accept it and they'll say, well, that's it, I can't do it anymore. And that's it, whereas other people would be really kicking and screaming. So we need to be the voice for older people.
Despite digital technology playing an increasing role in our lives, around 1 in 5 over 65s in the UK don't use the internet. Thornycroft Centre in Pontefract, West Yorkshire, provides a space for this age group to socialise and get help to go online.
I'm not that good with mobiles, so when you mention anything about online, I ain't a clue what you're talking about.
The closure of thousands of banks is also detrimental to the older generation.
A lot of our members what come, they tend to use cash. They don't like to use bank cards. I think a lot of it's trust or the lack of knowledge. They don't understand how it works. I think they're very vulnerable as well with online. It's really important that they're aware how to use it and how to use it safely.
So, in an online era, it's still crucial for many to have an offline option.
Welcome back. It's 4:36. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Well, I'm delighted to say I'm now joined by Labour MP Nick Thomas-Symonds. Nick, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. I'd like to talk to you about Rwanda, if I could. We just heard in the last half an hour, Operation Vector is the name of the government's new crackdown. 800 immigration officers involved across the country, chasing down 5,700 people currently on bail. Will it work, or is it too little, too late? More to the point, is it performative on the eve of elections?
Well, Martin, first of all, it's very good to join you as always. I've always feared that this Rwanda policy is a gimmick, and it's a pretty expensive gimmick at that, frankly. I mean, there's hundreds of millions of pounds that have already been spent on this scheme. And if you look at experience, Israel, for example, had a similar deal with Rwanda that it terminated in 2018 because it wasn't working. And that is my real fear around this. Now, of course, we have to tackle this issue of small boats in the English Channel. We really have to do that. But this gimmick, this sort of headline-grabbing way, if you like, of trying to do it, is no substitute for the very hard work that has to be done to crack down on the criminal smuggler gangs.
But you would agree, wouldn't you, that illegal immigration is completely and utterly out of control, Nick? What the Labour Party are going to do? I mean, you talked about having more staff to process them. That's basically what the Conservative Party has just proposed. Cracking down on gangs sounds great, but nobody's managed to achieve that so far. One interesting thing you did talk about, though, Nick Thomas-Symonds, was the idea of pairing with a third country to process. And countries that were mentioned included Greece and Turkey. Is that something that the Labour Party has got up its sleeve?
No, our plan is in a number of steps. So first of all, we do want to work internationally to break the model of the criminal smuggler gangs. People do not become refugees in northern France. They've usually travelled very long journeys. Now, what we are saying is that the money that's being allocated to the Rwanda scheme, we will instead spend to create a new unit within the National Crime Agency that will work closely with international partners, not just France, but Belgium, far further afield as well. Also work closely with Europol and go back to a situation where we can share data in real time and actually influence those investigations across the channel. Second, here, we've got to get a better grip of the asylum system. If you go back to 2014, over 80% of cases then were being dealt with within 6 months. And people were being housed in the accommodation that we've historically used. Instead now, we have a backlog way over 100,000 with people in hotels, miserable existence for them, and you're talking £6-7 million a day to the taxpayer, which is totally unacceptable. Thirdly, we need to get returns agreements in place. We'd create a returns unit in the Home Office dedicated to doing that, so that when people are not entitled to be here, they can then be removed. That is a fair system that Labour would look to create, both for the people in the system and for the British taxpayer.
Nick, would that returns agreement involve some kind of deal with the European Union member states? Because these people are coming from France. We should be sending them back to France. That's where they came from, a safe country. That's what millions of people think. But any form of deal with France, Macron has said, well, you'd have to go to Brussels. Is Sir Keir Starmer going to do a closer deal with the European Union to sort this out? Because that would mean a reciprocal deal where we are duty-bound to accept huge numbers across the 27 member states.
No, well, in terms of of course there is important bilateral work with France, first of all. Our law enforcement agencies working very closely with French law enforcement is a really important aspect of policing the situation in the Channel.
But so that hasn't worked so far,
really
Nick.
Important, Martin.
That hasn't worked. We spend £500 million a year. It hasn't worked.
Well, in terms of the numbers crossing the channel, Martin, you're entirely correct in terms of the thousands that are still coming. Doesn't mean, of course, that both our law enforcement and indeed French law enforcement are not stopping even greater numbers. But I agree that the fact that the numbers are continuing as they are shows that you need a more strategic approach. In relation to a returns agreement and the European Union, to suggest somehow we'd be taking tens of thousands of people is just frankly utter garbage. If you look at the situation that we had previously, it was called the Dublin III regulation, and what it meant was that we had the right to return people to other safe countries, and there was a very limited family reunion safe route. But that is just one aspect of this. We need to be looking at this both at source, busting the criminal smuggler gangs. We need to be looking at the chaos in the Home Office the Conservatives have created, and then the returns agreements as well. So it's a systematic approach. It isn't going to be something that one lever can simply solve.
OK, Nick, I want to talk to you about knife crime. We have a terrible, terrible, tragic problem with knife crime right across the United Kingdom. We saw in West Streeting's constituency yesterday, now tragically named 14-year-old boy was brutally killed. We saw an incident today in Sheffield in a school, the attempt of murder of 3 there. We saw in Wales a couple of weeks ago. We've got a terrible problem with knife crime. If the Labour Party were to get into power, what on earth are you going to do to stamp out this cancer?
Well, look, firstly, I think we'd all be thinking about the families who've been involved in all 3 incidents that you've mentioned, terrible incidents here in London, in Sheffield, and indeed back in Ammanford in my native Wales. And credit as well, Martin, because I've been on your show previously, I think, debating about the police. Great credit as well for the bravery that our first responders have showed in those 3 situations. Now, I also think that we have to be looking again at a number of different things. Firstly, we frankly need more police officers, and the next Labour government, if we are privileged enough to form one, will recruit 13,000 more police officers, and we will do that by pooling resources of all the police forces across England and Wales. Well, currently they are separately procuring cars, procuring uniforms and other things. Let's bring that together and use that money, that £360 million, to recruit more frontline officers. But we also need, with regard to knife crime, I think we've been at various stages of banning particular designs of knives since 2016. We need to look again at that to make sure that we are capturing the kind of knives that, firstly, we don't want on our streets, but we don't want traded online either. So these are crucial things that we need to be doing so that people do feel once again safe on our streets. And you'll know, Martin, that Keir Starmer's spoken about his 5 missions for the next Labour government. Tackling crime, halving violent crime is absolutely one of those missions and central to making people feel safe on our streets.
OK, Nick Thomas-Simmons, thank you as ever for joining us here on GB News. Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Pleasure, thank you.
Maybe get in touch with your views throughout the show. And let's go back to, we had a debate on slavery and should we pay reparations. A new book out today, of course, saying that Britain didn't really benefit from slavery economically, while admitting it was a bad thing. We had Femi Nylander on the show. We had a feisty debate. He said, we plundered the land. Walter Donaldson says this, plundering the land, says Femi. Once someone gets land, it has to be worked on to make it economically viable. Many nations don't do this. They expect international corporations to work it, same as during the slave trade. On Rwanda, Ian Thorne says this, if these people are guaranteed a job, then why do we have to pay them for 5 years? Won't they pay tax and spend money in Rwanda? Ian, as I understand it, they will still get paid by the British government. They'll get food, they'll get lodgings, and if they do start to earn money, they'll pay a small amount back for their lodgings, which they still will get at a preferential rate. Nice work if you can get it, isn't it? Now, coming up, we'll check out what's going on across the pond with these stupid student protests in California with my excellent panel. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a cloudy day for many of us with a few showers around, but heavier, more persistent and potentially thundery rain arrives from the near continent overnight. An old frontal system becomes reactivated as humid air arrives from Central Europe, and that's going to lead to some outbreaks of rain through the evening across the Midlands, central southern England, Wales, Northern Ireland, perhaps southwest Scotland. And then by midnight, thundery showers arrive from the continent. Hit and miss downpours, but these could be lively if they occur across central southern England into the Midlands and mid-Wales by the morning. Frequent lightning, hail, torrential downpours. So really it's across the southern third of the UK where we could see some heavy rain as we start off Thursday, persistent wet weather for Wales and the southwest, thundery showers elsewhere, much drier and calmer for Northern Ireland, Northern England, Scotland, some decent sunny spells in places, particularly for central and western Scotland, and feeling warm here with the sunshine, up to 21 or even 22 Celsius, perhaps 23 in one or two very warm spots. Also warm for Northern Ireland through the Midlands, but cold on the North Sea coast with the breeze coming from the North Sea, a lot of low cloud. That continues into Friday. And on Friday, we're going to see the best of the sunshine in the north of Scotland as well as the south of England, in between cloud and outbreaks of rain. Saturday sees further rain arrive from the south and rain or showers on Sunday.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from tomorrow,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections, we'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from tomorrow at midnight on GB News.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:49. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now I'm joined in the studio by the broadcaster and lawyer Andrew Eborn and the political commentator and trade unionist Andy MacDonald. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Gentlemen. So shall we start with the student protests in America? Have we got some footage of that to show to get the debate started?
I guess it's ultimately a question of what kind of community and obligation Columbia feels it has to its students. Do you want students to die of dehydration and starvation or get severely ill, even if they disagree with you? If the answer is no, then you should allow basic, I mean, it's crazy to say because we're on an Ivy League campus, but this is like basic humanitarian aid we're asking for. Like, could people please have a glass of water?
So Andrew Eborn, that was a PhD student at Harvard, basically saying we're revolutionaries, we've taken over the campus, but we're a bit hungry. So we not only want free Palestine, we now want free pizza.
Free pizza, free pepperoni pizza to go with your Palestinian for a wonderful alliteration. Students have a wonderful, rich history of protests. If you remember all the way back to 1968 with Vietnam, same university in Columbia. The slight difference there is they don't have troops on the ground, and is that sort of side. So absolutely, the right to protest is fundamental to our democratic system. When you're overstepping the mark, however, that's wrong. What you need to do is jaw, not war. That's what you need to look at.
And what do you think to these protesters? I mean, they have every right to do it, but some of the scenes we can see here is getting very disruptive inside some of these universities. Andy MacDonald, they were vandalising beautiful buildings. Do they have a right to do this, to occupy buildings and to destroy and vandalise them, or are they going too far and losing the room?
I mean, I've been on my fair share of protests and demonstrations over the last few years, and I think these scenes are absolutely horrific. You know, the fact that it's getting violent, there's actually Palestinian supporter violence as well. It's not just against the police or against counter-protests. There's infighting there. It's a complete mess. There's no organisation amongst them. They've gone and occupied this building in Columbia University. They just look like mugs to most people, honestly. People are going, what are they doing, man? You know, you've got this posh university, go and do your degree, and then you can change the world once you're a big diplomat or something like that.
And what's been interesting is that they sent in, was it 200 or 300 riot police to deal with this? They sent in the Bother Boys. They made a bunch of arrests. They got you can see there, they're sending in the riot cops. Do you think, Mr. Eborn, it's time for us to get similarly tough in the UK? We have these protests on our streets every Saturday. We seem to have a style of policing very different to what we're seeing here.
Well, Mr. Daubney, I think, Mr. Eborn, I love it. The reality is we need to crack down. When there's illegal activity, absolutely need to be very, very firm on that, whilst respecting the right to protest. And it was all about divestment in the same way it was when we were talking about Vietnam. And actually, you can go all the way back to the 1930s with Nazi Germany. It's all talking about the sort of, we don't want to invest. But as soon as you get these unlawful scenes, that is abhorrent. And we need to be absolutely firm on that sort of basis.
And a lot of people, Andrew, would like to see policing like this on our streets. You can see here, look, they're throwing these metal grates at the policemen. You know, if that happened at an Armistice Day parade, if that happened at St George's Day parade, you know British police would respond like this, yet it underlines the fact, is it not, that we seem to have two-tier policing on British streets?
I mean, I'm not sure about two-tier policing. I think there is some questions of the police here. They have been quite forceful in some areas. I'll leave it to the lawyers to decide whether or not they've gone over the line. But I do think that the police need to take a stronger stance when it does come to people who are being genuinely violent and are a risk to both the police and also the wider protest. You know, most of the people who believe in the self-determination of Palestine, I believe in the self-determination of Palestine. I look at these and I think, guys, what are you doing? You know, you're just ruining the cause. And I think most people will look at these and think, wow, this is just a mess, a disgrace, really.
But a lot of Americans have been watching this, Andrew Eborn, and saying about time. You know, they're happy the police are going in and getting the job done and ending what they see as a wave of entitled windbags who are causing damage and not speaking the mindset of the vast majority of ordinary tax-paying Americans.
Yeah, I think absolutely, as I say, the fundamental right to protest is that. But when you overstep the mark and get into illegal activity, that's completely wrong. And the biggest difference, well, two main differences between what's about this particular protest and 1968 about Vietnam. As I say, there are no boots on the ground in Gaza. They don't have that. And the American college students aren't facing the draft, which is what happened in 1968. So you need to have a look about that sort of side. And you've got to ask, are they actually getting their message across? By doing these illegal activities, I actually think you're basically getting people against you as a result of it.
And Andy, do you think that scene where she asked for a slice of pizza and a drink is just almost funny?
Oh, it's just completely out of touch, isn't it? Yeah, we're going to go and illegally occupy your building, but please, food. It's just like, come on, guys. Like, you should have at least brought it with you if you're going to try and stick out there for much longer. I mean, it's just an embarrassment.
OK, thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll join you again in the next hour. Andrew Eborn and Andy MacDonald, always a pleasure. Now, loads more to come in the next hour, including a crucial update on the government's plan to stop the boats. Do you believe they will ever do that? Operation Vector is its name. 800 immigration officers is its game. Will it do the job? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. But now it's time for your weather, and it's time for Aidan McGibbon.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a cloudy day for many of us with a few showers around, but heavier, more persistent and potentially thundery rain arrives from the near continent overnight. An old frontal system becomes reactivated as humid air arrives from Central Europe, and that's going to lead to some outbreaks of rain through the evening across the Midlands, central southern England, Wales, Northern Ireland, perhaps southwest Scotland. And then by midnight, thundery showers arrive from the continent. Hit and miss downpours, but these could be lively if they occur across central southern England into the Midlands and mid-Wales by the morning. Frequent lightning, hail, torrential downpours. So really it's across the southern third of the UK where we could see some heavy rain as we start off Thursday, persistent wet weather for Wales and the southwest, thundery showers elsewhere, much drier and calmer for Northern Ireland, Northern England, Scotland. Some decent sunny spells in places, particularly for central and western Scotland. And feeling warm here with the sunshine, up to 21 or even 22 Celsius, perhaps 23 in one or two very warm spots. Also warm for Northern Ireland through the Midlands, but cold on the North Sea coast with the breeze coming from the North Sea, a lot of low cloud. That continues into Friday. And on Friday, we're going to see the best of the sunshine in the north of Scotland as well as the south of England, in between cloud and outbreaks of rain. Saturday sees further rain arrive from the south and rain or showers on Sunday.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Still queuing southbound for the M6, 18 Middlewich towards Sandbach and Crewe. At 17, there's a breakdown blocking the inside lane, causing queues. Congestion to northbound M40 before the M42 interchange. At the outside lanes coned off for breakdowns, causing delays. The earlier bump northbound at the M1's gone, just around Bedford at 13. Still queuing though to just after junction 11A. Of course, in the roadworks are slow going. Queues either side of the M25, 20 minutes worth of delays clockwise from 27 to Brentwood 28 in the roadworks. Anti-clock queues for about 20 minutes before Wisley at 10. And Coleraine in Londonderry, the Milburn Road, the A2 still closed for a collision, no way through, and delays between the Portrush Road junction and Union Street. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
You really could be our next big winner with an incredible £20,000 in tax-free cash to play with this summer. What would you spend that on? Well, whilst you're thinking about it, listen to some of our previous winners getting that winning phone call from us.
You're the winner of the Great British Giveaway.
I'm slipping neck. Oh dear.
Oh my God, are you joking?
You're joking. Really? Seriously, it's not a wine. What is it?
Oh my God, this is amazing. Thank you.
The next winning call could be answered by you. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, 800 police officers have been involved in raids across the UK to detain the first migrants to be deported to Rwanda. Is Rishi Sunak's plan to stop the boats kicking into action, or is this a PR stunt ahead of tomorrow's local elections? We'll have all the details on that story. And it comes as more than 1,700 migrants cross the English Channel in small boats in just over 1 week alone. It's a scale of this problem simply getting too big to manage. And the 14-year-old boy tragically killed in yesterday's sword attack in Hainault in northeast London has been named as Daniel Angerin. His school has paid tribute to a much-loved pupil. We'll have all the details from the scene after this. And in another stabbing attack, 3 people have been injured and a 17-year-old arrested for attempted murder at a school in Sheffield. That's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Always a delight to have your company. Operation Vector is the name for the latest clampdown on Rwanda. 800 officers have the power to put their boots through doors to detect and remove, to deport those from who arrived there illegally, to get them off to Rwanda. But there are over 5,700 on bail. Is this enough? Can it cope? Or are you just glad that something is being done at long last? Will it ever stop the boats? Please let me know your views. I've read out a whole load of them so far. Got many, many more to get through before the end of the show. You can get them to me, gbnews.com/your say. Get them over. I'll read some out. But before all of that, it's time for your latest news headlines, and it's Ray Addison.
Thanks, Martin. Good afternoon. 2 minutes past 5, our top stories this hour. The 14-year-old boy killed in a sword attack in northeast London yesterday has been named as Daniel Angerin. The Met Police says a 36-year-old man remains in custody on suspicion of the teenager's murder. Daniel was a pupil at Bancrofts, that's the same school in East London, that was attended by Grace O'Malley Kumar, who was murdered in a knife attack in Nottingham last summer. 4 other people were injured during yesterday's attack. Well, police believe that a piece of glass may have been used as a weapon during an incident at a school in Sheffield earlier. The 17-year-old boy has been arrested for attempted murder after 3 people were hurt at the Burley Academy this morning. Assistant Chief Constable Dan Thorpe praised the actions of school staff in what he says would have been a frightening ordeal.
The 3 victims of this incident, 2 adults and a child, suffered minor injuries and were checked over at the scene by colleagues from Yorkshire Ambulance Service. The 2 adults both suffered minor injuries, one from a sharp object which is believed to be broken glass. The child was assaulted and thankfully has no visible injuries.
Scotland's SNP government has survived a confidence vote at the Scottish Parliament. The leader of Scottish Labour, Anas Sarwar, tabled the motion after a power-sharing deal between the SNP and the Greens collapsed. The motion was defeated by 70 votes to 58, comes after the resignation of First Minister Humza Yousaf on Monday. Well, as we've been hearing, the first migrants set to be deported to Rwanda have been detained, and they include both men and women. The Home Office says a series of operations took place across the country this week, with more due to be carried out shortly. Officials won't confirm how many people have been detained or where they were taken into custody. It comes ahead of the government's bid to get flights off the ground by July, after the Safety of Rwanda Act became law last week. Well, meanwhile, more than 1,700 small boat migrants have crossed the English Channel in just over a week, GB News can reveal, after several more boats were intercepted in UK waters today. A boatload of around 70 migrants was taken to Dover Harbour by lifeboat in the early hours of this morning. So far today, around 400 people have been taken to the Border Force Migrant Processing Centre. Official figures for yesterday reveal that 268 migrants arrived in the United Kingdom on 5 small boats. Police have arrested 3 people during a pro-Palestinian protest outside a government building in central London. Hundreds of demonstrators held a rally outside the Department for Business and Trade. Organisers say workers and trade unionists also held protests outside of BAE Systems sites to show solidarity with Palestinian workers. Violent clashes have erupted on the campus of the University of California in Los Angeles in the United States between pro-Palestinian protesters and a group of counter-demonstrators. Riot police had to break up crowds this morning. That comes hours after New York City police arrested approximately 300 pro-Palestinian demonstrators occupying a building on Columbia University campus in New York. Speaking a short while ago, New York City Mayor Eric Adams said the protest was not led by students.
Well, those who broke into the building did include students. It was led by individuals who are not affiliated with the university. The school needed the NYPD's assistance to clear Hamilton Hall and the encampments outside. And we said from the beginning that students have a right to protest, and free speech is the cornerstone of our society. But as our major concern, we knew and we saw that there were those who were never concerned about free speech. They were concerned about chaos.
Well, for the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen right now, or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Right, back to Martin.
Thank you, Ray. Now, we've got loads to get through this hour, and I'm going to start with some huge developments regarding the government's flagship policy to stop the boats. The first migrants set to be deported to Rwanda have now been detained, and the Home Office said a series of operations took place across the country this week. And meanwhile, GB News can reveal that more than 1,700 migrants crossed the English Channel on small boats in just over 1 week. Well, I'm now joined by GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome back to the show. So for those who are keen to clamp down on immigration, this is great optics. 800 immigration officers we saw on screen there, putting boots through doors, getting asylum seekers in the backs of vans. But the big question is, Mark, with 5,700 on bail and 1,700 arriving in 1 week alone, is this too little too late?
Well, it certainly highlights what an absolutely monumental task the authorities have in trying to get enough people on flights to Rwanda to act as a deterrent, because clearly so far it's not acting as a deterrent. People are still pouring across the channel every time weather conditions are good. And once again today, 400 migrants came across the English Channel on multiple small boats, taking that total, as you mentioned there, to 1,700 in 8 days, just over a week. An indication, as I say, of just how significant the problem is. Well, we're seeing the images there of the raids that took place, immigration enforcement, 800 of those officers involved in the operations across the UK that will continue, we're told, until they have rounded up enough individuals to fill the first flight. Then it will slow down. They'll get that first flight off, they hope, in 9 to 11 weeks' time. And then after that, there will be a steady drumbeat, to quote Rishi Sunak, of flights leaving for Rwanda. Will that be enough, though, to deter the people smuggling gangs who are, to break the business model, which is very lucrative for them at the moment?
Certainly is. And Mark, a little earlier, I spoke to the Labour MP, Nick Thomas-Symonds, about those first Rwanda detentions, and here's what he had to say.
Always feared that this Rwanda policy is a gimmick, and it's a pretty expensive gimmick at that, frankly. I mean, there's hundreds of millions of pounds that have already been spent on this scheme. And if you look at experience, Israel, for example, had a similar deal with Rwanda that it terminated in 2018 because it wasn't working. And that is my real fear around this. Now, of course, we have to tackle this issue, but this gimmick, this sort of headline-grabbing way, if you like, of trying to do it, is no substitute for the very hard work that has to be done to crack down on the criminal smuggler gangs.
Well, Mark White, you'd expect Nick Thomas-Symonds to be critical of the government, but when I repeatedly pressed him what the Labour Party would do, all he seemed to have was, well, we'll crack down on the gangs. Haven't we been trying that for years, Mark?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, to suggest that the National Crime Agency is not involved in doing just that at the moment is, one, an insult to the good work that they're doing. But also the Labour approach, I think, has a certain level of naivety to it as well, because this is a huge business now and a very sophisticated business across the English Channel. And just like the drugs trade, yes, you can, of course, have successes and carry out huge operations that result in the recovery of many millions of pounds worth of drugs, but that just dents the problem. The law enforcement element in itself is not going to bring about an end to the crossing of thousands of people across the English Channel to the UK. Just look at this week. 1,700 people, as we've revealed, have crossed in 8 days. Do the maths. It's £3,000 roughly per ticket on each of these boats. That's £5.1 million that the people smugglers have made in just 8 days. It's big business. They're not going to go away quietly.
Mark White, mind-boggling numbers. Thank you for that. Excellent, as ever, Mark White, Home and Security Editor, on the situation of Rwanda detentions. Now, a 17-year-old boy has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder after 3 people were injured at a secondary school in Sheffield. And GB News reporter Anna Riley is at the scene with the latest. Anna, welcome to the show. Another school incident, great concern, and earlier on we heard from the police. What's the latest?
Yes, we did, Martin. This incident happened at the Burley Academy here in Sheffield at 8:50 this morning. Police issuing a statement earlier to the media saying that they were here within minutes of that initial call being made. And in that call, there were reports of a sharp object being used to attack people. That object being believed to be broken glass rather than a knife. Police confirmed that a child was assaulted during this incident and that 2 adults also suffered from minor injuries as a result of what happened. In the statement that he gave to the media, Assistant Chief Constable Dan Thorpe confirmed that the child who was assaulted thankfully has no visible injuries, and the 17-year-old boy remains in police custody, being questioned by South Yorkshire police officers on suspicion of attempted murder. This is what he told us earlier.
Burley is a close-knit community, and while these events concluded in a swift arrest, it will no doubt cause ongoing concern. Our officers will remain here in Burley for the rest of today and in the coming days. If you are worried, I would like to discuss what has happened, please do not hesitate to approach officers. We are here for you to make you feel safe in your local area.
A spokesperson for the secondary school also issued a statement earlier in which they said that the students and staff were safe, that the school went into lockdown during the incident and that it's closed for the day. But the teacher also spoke out outside the school as well and said that the school will open as normal tomorrow. Education unions as well speaking out after this incident, as well as Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, saying that she'd been in contact with the school today. And in terms of the unions, the National Education Union saying that it's another shocking incident happening on school premises, that violence has no place in our schools and colleges, and they say that the government needs to recognise the scale of the problem and adopt a public health approach to tackling youth violence, as Scotland did in the 90s, and that this should also include urgent reinvesting in youth services and centres that young people once relied on.
OK, Anna Riley, thank you for the latest on the situation in the Burley Academy in Sheffield. Thanks for joining us live from the scene. And joining me now to discuss this further is a former Metropolitan Police Detective, Peter Blexley. Peter, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure, although in sad circumstances. We had the situation yesterday in North East London. A 14-year-old boy has been named. We have a terrible, terrible problem with knife crime in Britain, Peter. It's simply getting out of control. What do you think is the answer? What needs to be done? And in particular, your field of expertise, what powers would you like to see the police have to grapple with this cancer?
And may I just mention, tragically, a case that's barely had any coverage outside of Hampshire this week. A man in his 40s was stabbed to death. Yet another victim of knife crime this week. And so it goes on and on. And the bloodshed continues, the loss of life, the heartache and the hurt for so many families, the length and breadth of the country, but of course, predominantly in London. In answer to your question, well, I heard Mark Rowley, the Met Police Commissioner, this morning, speaking on the media about they're going to be doing more stop and search. And I welcome that. That cannot happen quickly enough. From a policing perspective, that is the most important tool that they have at their disposal. Of course, each and every time they launch stop and search operations, there is resistance from certain pockets of particular communities. It was done disproportionately against black people in the past, but as Sir Mark Rowley pointed out today, young black men in London are 13 more times likely to be murdered than a white young man. So, of course, there will be more stop and search of that community. They also need to target.
Peter, specifically, we're seeing pictures on the screen now of that 36-year-old man who is still in detention. He was responsible for this attack, this vicious attack yesterday in Hainault in northeast London. He was tasered to the ground. That tasering surely perhaps saved further lives. How many coppers as a percentage have tasers at the moment? And would you like to see all police officers given that power to drop people like this?
All frontline response police officers should, as a matter of urgency, be trained in the use and issued with a taser throughout the country. It is quite scandalous that they're not. Our police officers, our courageous frontline police officers, are not cannon fodder. They are being assaulted in record numbers, and it is absolutely it's just a scandal. We need to protect them. There is a duty of care from chief constables and commissioners to protect their frontline staff. And the best thing that can do in a fairly short space of time is to issue them all with tasers.
Peter Blexy, mainlining common sense as ever there. And without that taser, without the power to deploy that, who knows what further damage would have been caused. And Peter Blexy, I'm sure you'll echo me in saying the officer who deployed that taser was an incredibly brave individual who I believe deserves the highest bravery accolade in the land. Peter Blexy, it's always a delight to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us. I get lots more on that story on our website, and thanks to you, GBNews.com is now the fastest growing national news website in the country. It's got all the breaking news and the brilliant analysis that you've come to expect from us here at GB News, so thank you very much. Now, summer is just around the corner, apparently, and we want to make it sizzle for you with an incredible £20,000 in cash up for grabs in the latest Great British Giveaway. It's our biggest cash prize to date, and it could all be yours. And here's how you could be our winner.
We've blown the budget by giving you the chance to win a totally terrific £20,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now, you've been getting in touch in your droves via Your Say, and here's a few that I would like to read out. Tommy McGuinness says this: £3,000 and a flight cheaper than a month's on benefits and free hotels. This, of course, is about the Rwanda scheme. Sounds like Tommy is a fan. Dave Clark adds this: I couldn't give a what's it about how much we give these people to go to Rwanda, just as long as we get rid of them and solve this problem once and for all. And on swords and knife crime, we just asked Peter Blexy, what can we do about this? And Jackie Phoenix adds this: the government seems to be able to control guns and keep them out of Britain, so why exactly can't they keep zombie knives and machetes and swords out of our country? Keep them out and arrest anybody who has one. And Davey Aggie says this about the Rwanda clampdown, Operation Vector, as revealed by Mark White on the show earlier. He says this: great, at last, video evidence of detentions. Now just wait for the do-gooders to come along and block every single flight and obstacle in the way of the deportations. Rishi Sunak, bring flight dates forward, then we will get behind you. Well, thanks for those opinions. And I'll read out a bunch more before the end of the show. Now, up next, the SNP clings on and survives a no-confidence vote. We'll have all the details on that. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from tomorrow,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections, we'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from tomorrow at midnight on GB News.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Cheryl Baker. Good morning, Cheryl.
Good morning.
When you think back to 1981, I mean, obviously the ABBA victory then wasn't all that long ago, 9 years earlier. Do you think they had a huge influence then on the sort of direction that Eurovision was taking?
Yeah, they did. They changed it completely. Because up to then, it had all been very staid and a bit posh, long frock, sticky bow ties, you know. And then they came along and they blew it out of the water. They looked so different. And they modernised it. And I think, yeah, it made a big change. Made a big change after that.
And we were watching your performance on Eurovision a little bit earlier on of making your mind up. I mean, you had so much fun, didn't you, up on that stage? Were you, in some part, inspired by ABBA?
Yes, I would say so. It was... ABBA was 74. I turned professional in 75 and did my first song for Europe, which was, you know, when they choose the British song to go forward. I did my first one in February 1976. So, yeah, it was only months after ABBA's performance that I started my own Eurovision journey. Yeah, they just changed the face of it. They changed the face of Eurovision. And if you look at what Eurovision is now, I think that all started with ABBA's performance. It made people think this is much more than just a song contest. It's all about the look. I mean, the clothes, they looked fantastic. And even the composer, or not the composer, what's he called? The conductor. He was dressed as Napoleon. It made it fun. Fantastic song, obviously, brilliant singing, but the whole look of it just changed the way that Eurovision is, and to this day.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's fast approaching 5:25. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now let's turn our attention to Scotland now, where the SNP has survived a no-confidence vote. And the leader of Scottish Labour, Anna Sarwar, tabled the motion after a power-sharing deal between the SNP and the Greens collapsed. But it seems now that the gamble hasn't paid off. Well, let's cross now to GB News' Scotland reporter Tony Maguire, who's at Holyrood. So, Tony, welcome to the show. It seems the SNP dodged the noose. They survived to fight on another day.
Indeed, good afternoon, Martin. Well, certainly it's something of a distraction on a road of distractions while we await the next two candidates to replace Humza Yousaf. Or it could be more than two candidates, who knows. Certainly there's two names hot in contention right now, that being, of course, being Kate Forbes and Nicola Sturgeon's own deputy, First Minister John Swinney. Now, today's vote of no confidence was one of two. Obviously, Douglas Ross pulled his vote yesterday in light of Humza Yousaf's resignation on Monday, but Anna Sarwar carried on with the vote of confidence against the entire Scottish Government. Had he been successful, well, we'd be barrelling on our way towards a Scottish election, perhaps even before a Westminster election, and that was not to be. In fact, about 30 minutes it took for the debate to take place. We heard from Scottish Conservative leader Douglas Ross, who got himself a little bit of a telling off by presiding officer Alison Johnson. And then we also heard, of course, from Anna Sarwar. We heard from Patrick Harvie, leader of the Greens, who ultimately voted in favour of keeping the Scottish Government where it is right now. And so they might, because, of course, the Scottish Greens, they're pro-independence, as are the SNP, and it serves them certainly to keep a pro-independence party in government, at least for the next couple of years. Needless to say, Kate Forbes, well, she wasn't wanting to talk to the press. She made quite a beeline through the press pack, quite expertly, if I might say so. But John Swinney, well, he did step and talk to the press for a little while. Here's what he had to say about his race so far.
I have to be very, very careful about my family circumstances, so I will not be rushed into making decisions that affect my loved ones. And it's a big step for me to take, so please give me the time.
Is it a standoff, Mr. Swinney?
Oh, it's not in any shape or form. I would describe that. It's about people taking the time to make the right decisions for those they love. Thank you very much.
A very, very short couple of words there from John Swinney. And of course, we still don't have any definite names in the pot. Certainly, we're going to have to stay tuned to Scotland and what happens over the next few days until we finally get our candidates.
Thank you, Tony Maguire, live from Holyrood. And let's also speak now to the freelance columnist, Alistair Stewart. Alistair, welcome to the show. So the SNP survived to fight on another day. The big question now is who will be the successor to Humza Yousaf? Will it be the continuity candidate and John Swinney, or can we expect a surprise? And people in Scotland that we've been speaking to over the past few weeks and days, they're crying out for change to get away from this woke agenda of gender identity politics, of hate crime, of net zero. Do you think we might see a return to common sense, or can we expect more of the same?
I think it's going to be more of the same in either eventuality. John Swinney was formerly the right-hand man of Nicola Sturgeon, and Kate Forbes, who's also allegedly in the running, was her protege. You're going to get more of the same either way. The real question here is, how are we going to assuage the Scottish Green Party? Because once again, they demonstrated by voting against the motion today that they're really holding the strings with the future of the SNP at Holyrood, and they're deciding the agenda of the independence movement. It's up to the opposition parties to realise that, because the best candidate for them that the SNP could put forward is Kate Forbes. She's still a divisive figure for the left. Patrick Harvie, the leader of the Scottish Greens today, came out and said that the next leader will have to work on a centre-left agenda. She is quite right of the SNP. It's all to play for at the moment, but in either eventuality, there's going to be much more of the same until we can push on to the next election in Scotland in 2026. And the only people who suffer in the meantime are the electorate, who are needing real answers to extraordinarily difficult policy issues facing the country. And the SNP has been lagging on providing solutions for that.
Do you think the membership might get a say in this? If it goes on longer, they might prefer to go for somebody like Kate Forbes if she puts her hat in the ring, because she is more critical of the gender stuff. She's more critical of the obsession with identity politics. She seems to be more mainstream, which is certainly what we're hearing from the voters. Or will it be a smaller decision taken by the top brass, which would favour surely John Swinney?
I think you're seeing a real divide now. That's a real cleavage between the membership of the SNP and the political party at Westminster and at Holyrood itself. The membership, the experiment of Humza Yousaf has failed. He was a younger candidate. He was a career politician. He's resigned because of a situation that he himself created. Kate Forbes is comparatively also quite inexperienced in government. She's held some senior briefs, but is inexperienced by contrast. John Swinney has been at the top of the SNP poll for the last 17 years of them in government and the last 30 years of them being leading on the Holyrood agenda and campaigning for it in the first place. It depends on what the mood of the party is. They're going to lean into nostalgia to get them over the hill, and that's going to require Mr. Swinney to have a real appetite to lead beyond 2026, and at the moment he seems on the fence. But also Kate Forbes is a gamble in the same way that Humza Yousaf was a gamble, and they might not be in the mood for that given how things have unfolded over the last week.
OK, well, let's see how it pans out. John Swinney is currently the biggest favourite at 6-4. Kate Forbes, meanwhile, on the inside rail at 4-1. Alistair Stewart, thanks for joining us on the show. Always a delight. And there's lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock. And how do you make the perfect bacon butty? The big questions. We'll all look at that. Oh, don't know about you, I'm drooling. Well, experts say they've come up with the ultimate recipe. We'll find out what it is, and this is going to be a huge talking point. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines, and it's Ray Addison.
Thanks, Martin. 5:31. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Our top stories. The 14-year-old boy killed in a sword attack in north-east London yesterday has been named as Daniel Angerin. The Met Police says a 36-year-old man remains in custody on suspicion of the teenager's murder. Daniel was a pupil at Bancrofts, that's the same school in East London attended by Grace O'Malley Kumar, who was murdered in a knife attack in Nottingham last summer. 4 other people were injured during yesterday's attack. Well, police believe a piece of glass may have been used as a weapon during an incident at a school in Sheffield. The 17-year-old boy has been arrested for attempted murder after 3 people were hurt at the Burley Academy this morning. Police have praised the actions of school staff during this frightening ordeal. Well, as we've been hearing, Scotland's SNP government has survived a confidence vote at the Scottish Parliament. The leader of Scottish Labour, Anas Sarwar, tabled the motion after a power-sharing deal between the SNP and the Greens collapsed. The motion was defeated by 70 votes to 58. Comes after the resignation of First Minister Humza Yousaf on Monday. The first migrants set to be deported to Rwanda have been detained, and they include both men and women. The Home Office says a series of operations took place across the country this week, with more due to be carried out. Officials won't confirm how many people have been detained or where they were taken into custody. Comes ahead of the government's bid to get flights off the ground by July, after the Safety of Rwanda Act became law last week. And vicars have occupied the Labour Party headquarters in London to protest against an oil field licence. 5 members of the Christian Climate Action Group have occupied the lobby of the building. They've been holding a church service to protest against Labour's refusal to cancel the Rosebank oil field licence. 20 others have been protesting outside. Police have responded to the scene. We'll bring you more on that story as we get it. But for now, for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
OK, let's look at the markets now. The pound will buy you $1.2481 and €1.1692. Price of gold, £1,846 and 42 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's closed at 8,121 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
My favourite part of the show now, joining me now is Michelle Dewberry, of course, Jubes & Co, 6 till 7. Michelle, we're about to discuss what's the perfect bacon butty. What's on your menu?
My perfect bacon butty would be one without bacon in it. I don't like it. It'd be much better if it was sausage, surely. That would be a very short segment if it was on my programme, I can tell you. And don't even get me started if you're going to start talking about having brown sauce on it. Get out of town. That's what I say. You've got me on a roll now because I also wouldn't like it with bread. I would like it with toast. And I wouldn't want butter on my toast either because the oil is already there from either the sausage or the bacon. But anyway, I've gone off on a tangent. What you asked me, what was going on my programme? Of course, it's May Day, Labour Day, Workers' Day. So I want to look at the Labour Party's new deal for workers. That is set to be watered down. Is that the right move? When it comes to the balance of rights, where should it tip? Should it be on the side of the worker or the side of business? Also, do we need an iron dome in this country? Are we right to get into talks with the EU? I've got Aaron Bastani and Peter Hitchens coming up to keep me company. Lots more that we'll be getting through before 7 o'clock as well, Martin. But you've made me hungry now.
Yeah,
I want to go home and have a sandwich.
Michelle, I'm in a state of shock. I had you nailed on as a bacon butty sort of lass, and I definitely had you nailed on as a brown sauce kind of lass. I'm in a total state of shock.
No, I can't stand it. And by the way, if I ever do eat bacon, if anyone's sitting there thinking, can I make Michelle breakfast, you lucky so-and-sos, I like my bacon incredibly crispy on the rare occasions that I do eat it, just so you know.
OK, we're all getting hungry now. Michelle Dewberry will be hungry for your show 6 till 7. Jubes & Co, thank you very much for joining us. And on that point, in a few minutes, the recipe for what experts say is the perfect bacon butty. But first, there's a new way to get in touch with us at GB News, and here's Bev Turner with all the details.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/yoursay.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner with the very latest. In Cheshire on the M6 is the left lane on that 4-lane stretch coned off southbound. 18 to 17 between the Middlewich and Sandbatch turn-offs. Highways are dealing with a breakdown in the left lane. On the M16 Greater Manchester, 2 problems on the anti-clockwise carriageway. First of all, one lane's blocked from Princess Parkway Junction 5 towards the M56 where a vehicle's caught fire, and a lane's blocked on the exit slip at 16 at Pendlebury where a vehicle's having its tyre changed. In Staffordshire, south of Lichfield, the A5 is closed westbound from Wall Island to Muckley Corner. That's down to an accident. The A13 is blocked out of London just after the Canning Town flyover for accident investigation work. Long queues back to Limehouse and via Aspen Way. And in Londonderry at Coleraine, the A2 Milburn Road is closed following a serious accident just off the A29. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
It's a remarkable story, isn't it?
Amazing.
Extraordinary. And also, she was unflappable, apparently, the Princess Royal.
She's
just
brilliant.
refused to get out of the car and said, I'm not going anywhere. Extraordinary. Well, Jim Beaton was awarded the George Cross for protecting the Princess, and delighted to say joins us now, along with the former head of Royalty Protection, Di Davis. Jim, you won't remember, but I met you some time ago at the Imperial War Museum when Princess Anne was opening an exhibition to do with the George Cross, and you were there reunited with her. And you told me then what great admiration you had for the Princess, cool under fire, but you didn't do so badly yourself.
It was probably my job. And also, I had a wee bit of police training, not very much, but a little bit, whereas Princess Anne had nothing. And yet, the way she displayed it, you would have thought she'd been highly trained to deal with any type of that situation.
Even though you'd had some training, you took 3 bullets for the princess. You effectively stood between her and a deranged gunman.
Well, I was supposed to be a protection officer, really, so I just tried to fuddle about. You must remember that back in 1974, there was no communication, and we were extremely lucky that Michael Hills, who was outside Clarence House and nearby, had got one of the fast police radios, or radios on his shoulder, so he was able to send a message out. Otherwise, we would have just been relying on the good old public to phone in and say there's something happening.
Yeah.
So times have changed drastically.
Welcome back. It's 5:40. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, a bacon butty is a British breakfast staple. But what makes the perfect bacon butty? Well, according to the chairman of the English Breakfast Society, Guy Buell, the perfect bacon sarnie is made with toasted white sliced bread, mildly salted English butter and good old British back bacon. But many have slammed the simple recipe for not including any ketchup or brown sauce. Well, prepare to drool, because we're now joined by actor Charlie Lawson, who agrees with the expert as he joins me now. Charlie, how can you say that toast is the right way to go? It's like chewing sawdust if you're not careful.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'll tell you what, I was dreaming of having breakfast with Michelle Dewberry, but I don't know, I wouldn't put sauce anywhere near it. What it requires is, it's very important that it should be the cheapest, softest, gooeyest white bread, toasted and nonsense, slightly salted. It should be so salty, it should be bad for you. And the bacon should be cooked quite well done, but still enough to see the fat. And you should swig it down with a pint of full fat milk, because God did not create the bovine species to produce something that's got no fat in it, or semi-skimmed. So but I certainly would not be putting HP sauce, other products are available, or Heinz tomato ketchup on a bacon butty. That's some weird thing they do in Godalming or something.
Yeah, I mean, I do like the bread, as you say, the soft white bread. So when you clamp it in your claw, it almost deteriorates to nothing. And that is why, Charlie, I think bread is simply better when it's not toasted. It just goes into a nice ball, much easier. I can't believe you're going for toast, mate.
Well, I mean, alternatively, if it's that photograph you had of that bread, that was far too posh. This bread here, it shouldn't have any holes in it. It should be really soggy. And if you want it on bread, the secret is, when you've done it, put both palms on top and press it down so it's real, so you can actually flap it about in the wind. So it's all the salty butter stuck into it. Honest to God, and listen, take it from me, I come from a land where we do the Ulster fry, so I know all about this sort of carry on, you know what I mean? All you English people, you have this the English best English breakfast, and you put baked beans on the plate. The name of Jesus, you want tatty bread and all the proper stuff that we have.
I absolutely agree with that. I actually believe that baked beans, and indeed, don't get me started on hash browns. Charlie Lawson, the hash brown has no place on a breakfast. Very quickly, is it ordinary bacon or smoked?
Well, I would edge towards the smoked bacon if I was you. It just gives it more salt. And salt, as we all know, is extremely good for you. So, look, Martin, honestly, I'm not a great advert. I love good food. I love proper food. But you cannot beat once or twice a week a really top-drawer bacon sandwich. And listen, one day, Michelle, I'll do you breakfast, darling, and I guarantee you'll fall for it.
Charlie Lawson, plenty to sink our teeth into there, including the tantalising prospect of breakfast with Michelle Dewberry. Thank you, Charlie Lawson. Always an absolute delight to have you on the show. Thank you very much. I'm getting very hungry now. You can get in touch in your droves on your says. And Lynn Dixon, on topic of Rwanda, says this: don't forget, we will have a never-ending continuous flow and conveyor belt of migrants being sent to Rwanda if it ever happens. Simon Stevenson saying this: 1,700 900 arriving in the last 8 days, 5,700 earmarked to be sent to Rwanda. The solution is now quite simple. All of those arriving from today should be immediately arrested before the human rights industry and the useless, incompetent Home Office officials can intervene. Well, you're certainly speaking your mind there. Well, today's wonderful panel are up next for the final furlong. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a cloudy day for many of us with a few showers around, but heavier, more persistent and potentially thundery rain arrives from the near continent overnight. An old frontal system becomes reactivated as humid air arrives from Central Europe, and that's going to lead to some outbreaks of rain through the evening across the Midlands, central southern England, Wales, Northern Ireland, perhaps southwest Scotland. And then by midnight, thundery showers arrive from the continent. Hit and miss downpours, but these could be lively if they occur across central southern England into the Midlands and mid-Wales by the morning. Frequent lightning, hail, torrential downpours. So really it's across the southern third of the UK where we could see some heavy rain as we start off Thursday, persistent wet weather for Wales and the southwest, thundery showers elsewhere, much drier and calmer for Northern Ireland, Northern England, Scotland, some decent sunny spells in places, particularly for central and western Scotland, and feeling warm here with the sunshine, up to 21 or even 22 Celsius, perhaps 23 in one or two very warm spots. Also warm for Northern Ireland through the Midlands, but cold on the North Sea coast with the breeze coming from the North Sea, a lot of low cloud. That continues into Friday. And on Friday, we're going to see the best of the sunshine in the north of Scotland as well as the south of England, in between cloud and outbreaks of rain. Saturday sees further rain arrive from the south and rain or showers on Sunday.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from tomorrow,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections, we'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from tomorrow at midnight on GB News.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:47, the final furlong. This is Martin Daubney on GB News. I'm joined in the studio by my double panel, broadcaster and lawyer Andrew Eborn and the political commentator and trade unionist Andy MacDonald. Gents, welcome back. Let's kick off with a debate about slavery. We had it on the show earlier. A new book has come out saying Britain didn't profit from slavery. In fact, it was a massive tax burden, while, of course, pointing out it was a terrible thing for the nations impacted in the old colony. But this surely knocks the idea of reparations into the long grass. If so few people benefited from it, why should everybody have to repay that bill?
It's fascinating. I was talking to Christian, the author, about this in the wonderful green room we have here at GB Towers. And the reality is that what he was saying is only contributed about 3% to the economy, but the cost of it was more than 3%. So he thought the profit was net zero. That doesn't change the fact that it was abhorrent, and that's the reason people are repairing. They're not saying this is how much we got as a result of it. They're turning around and saying it was abhorrent.
Yeah, and Andy, what struck me as fascinating about this, it's such a tiny minority of very wealthy families, often who were the landed gentry, the ruling class of the time, mostly benefited. You represent trade unions, you represent ordinary working class working people. Why now should people who had no involvement and certainly no profit have to foot the bill?
Well, I completely disagree with the idea of reparations. I think it's very silly. I think it sets a very dangerous precedent for many oppressed groups over time. Most ethnic groups have been oppressed by some ethnic group over the last, 5 centuries, however long. And I think it's a very silly precedent to start. But I do look at this research and I think, what is the point? What does this research do for anyone? Debating whether it was a profit or you only just, broke even with slavery. I think it's a very silly discussion to have when it was an abhorrent thing for the African nations that were enslaved. I think it's just a silly discussion to have. I don't know why he's doing this research now. There are more important things that the IEA, I'm sure, could be doing.
But what was interesting, just on one point, just imagine if they made a loss. What do? We go inside and say, pay us some more money because we made a loss as a result of it. It doesn't make sense. What Christian was also saying, and this is not new. People have been talking about this since the 80s and so on and so forth, but he's now shone a spotlight on it. Kemi's come out and in support of the book on that sort of basis. So it is interesting. Shine a spotlight on history, but make sure we learn the lessons. It was an abhorrent trade, and that's the thing we should learn.
Yeah, I don't think anybody is in favour of slavery in any side of this debate, but what Kemi Badenoch makes the point of is often we hear that slavery was the bedrock, the driving force. Without it, the United Kingdom would not have been the international powerhouse of the Industrial Revolution that it was. Kemi Badenoch and this report points out, in fact, British ingenuity and industry and free markets and that get-up-and-go spirit was the true driver, not taking and plundering from African or third world nations.
Well, I disagree with that premise. I think, the slave trade, although they may have only just broken even, it did set up the infrastructure and the framework for the other trades across that kind of African-American triangle. You're looking at silk, looking at crops, those kind of things. It did set up the infrastructure for Britain to push forward into the Industrial Revolution. So it may not have been directly slavery, but it was the consequences and the fallouts from slavery that did push it forward to the Industrial Revolution.
But the biggest driving force was British ingenuity, which we must celebrate. We punch way above our weight and continue to do so in things like my pet subject, AI, where we're champing around the world. So absolutely all praise to British ingenuity.
I think Anthropic are doing excellent things here. They're based here in London. I think they are taking the fight to, open AI on AI, but, that's another discussion.
Do you think under a potential future Labour government, Andy MacDonald, this conversation might come back? There are a few people within the Labour Party that seem to think reparations is a good idea.
I don't think it will. I think Keir Starmer's made his position quite clear. This isn't a conversation he's interested in happening. He's going to push on and fight for what the British people really deserve, which is a functioning government, a functioning economy and functioning foreign relations.
OK, let's get on now to the most important question in the nation, Andrew Eborn.
Yes.
What makes the perfect bacon butty? I'm astonished it came out. I think it's wrong. They toast their bread.
I love seeing Michelle on earlier when she said the perfect bacon butty is one which doesn't have bread and doesn't have bacon. And what was that about? I think the best one is actually an LGBT sandwich, which is lettuce, G is guacamole, which is like avocado, B is your bacon, and your T is your tomato. I love that sort of stuff. Maybe a bit of cheese, but toasted is good. Also today, it's just been reported they've done a new bread which tastes like white bread, but it's got all the good stuff in it now. Scientists have, the boffins have helped make the better sandwich.
I'm very good. Your LGBT sandwich didn't have the Q plus on.
I could do that.
That conversation was going elsewhere. Andy, what about you? When we talked about toasted bread earlier, you also blanched.
Oh no, it's absolutely ridiculous. The crunch is meant to come from the bacon, not from the bread. I'm a simple guy. Classic white roll, bit of butter, bit of bacon.
A roll,
happy days.
not sliced.
No, I like a roll. I think it adds a bit of texture that you wouldn't get from bread.
Now, I know that you're a trade unionist and you work for the Labour Party as well. Do you like this kind of soda bread? This kind of modern Ponzi bread?
Oh, God, no, it's horrible. I'm a bit of a bread aficionado. I'm a fan of a plaited brioche, if I'm honest. I know that's a bit middle class.
Do you have bacon in a plaited brioche?
No, you wouldn't. You'd have it with butter, with a bit of jam, but no, I keep it simple.
What about this one on your screen here, fellas? That's quite... See, for me, that's too overdone, that
too woke, that's woke.
No, I like a bit of crisp. You want to play with your senses, with your taste buds, so you want to have the crunch, you want to be able to have the other bits and pieces. So I think you're right. You have the hot bacon and the cold bread. That works in an interesting way.
That was a sourdough bread, which I believe is simply a way of taking money off the middle classes. It rips your palate apart, it's overpriced, and there's no butter on it.
Hey, you've got to have butter. No, you have to have butter because it melts and that sort of. I also think you have to have ketchup, because I think... But also, the best way of enjoying your bacon sandwich is how you like it. Telling people how to eat a bacon sandwich is the worst thing we possibly do.
You're a southerner, you like Tommy Kay. I'm assuming you're from Nottinghamshire, you're a brown sauce fella.
I am HP all the way, man.
Same as me. Now, this fella colour. He said no sauce. He said no brown, no red, just butter, toasted, keep it simple, and the bacon has to be back bacon. Final question, plain or smoked?
Smoked.
Plain or smoked?
Smoked.
We're all three smokers. Superb stuff, and that's it for today. Thank you very much for joining us, Andy MacDonald and Andrew Eborn. Great fun end to the show, and I don't know about you, I'm absolutely Hank Marvin. We've covered all sorts of topic. You got that one. That's a joke of a certain vintage, shall we say. Now, I'll be back tomorrow, 3 till 6 p.m, but coming up after this, of course, is Michelle Dewberry, who earlier on said a perfect bacon sandwich contains no bacon. I'm in a state of shock. I cannot believe it. I had her nailed down as a bacon butty lass all along, and she doesn't even like any sauce. Astonishing. Anyway, that's enough from me. I'm getting very hungry. Let's move on now. It's time for your weather, and it's Aidan McGibbon.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a cloudy day for many of us with a few showers around, but heavier, more persistent and potentially thundery rain arrives from the near continent overnight. An old frontal system becomes reactivated as humid air arrives from Central Europe, and that's going to lead to some outbreaks of rain through the evening across the Midlands, central southern England, Wales, Northern Ireland, perhaps southwest Scotland. And then by midnight, thundery showers arrive from the continent. Hit and miss downpours, but these could be lively if they occur across central southern England into the Midlands and mid-Wales by the morning. Frequent lightning, hail, torrential downpours. So really it's across the southern third of the UK where we could see some heavy rain as we start off Thursday, persistent wet weather for Wales and the southwest, thundery showers elsewhere, much drier and calmer for Northern Ireland, Northern England, Scotland. Some decent sunny spells in places, particularly for central and western Scotland. And feeling warm here with the sunshine, up to 21 or even 22 Celsius, perhaps 23 in one or two very warm spots. Also warm for Northern Ireland through the Midlands, but cold on the North Sea coast with the breeze coming from the North Sea, a lot of low cloud. That continues into Friday. And on Friday, we're going to see the best of the sunshine in the north of Scotland as well as the south of England, in between cloud and outbreaks of rain. Saturday sees further rain arrive from the south and rain or showers on Sunday.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner with your latest. On the M60 in Greater Manchester, there are long anti-clockwise queues towards the M56 interchange. That was after a vehicle caught fire. However, all restrictions have now been lifted. In Staffordshire, to the south of Lichfield, the A5 remains closed westbound from Wall Island through to Muckley Corner following a crash. Queues back along the M6 toll. On the M1 in Northamptonshire, 2 lanes are blocked southbound at 18 the Rugby exit following a breakdown. Very slow through Berkshire on the M4 heading west from junction 5 to 6 towards Slough. The left lane's blocked off by a breakdown. And just northwest of Bristol, there are queues heading up the M5 over the Avonmouth Bridge. The 2 outside lanes shut where a car's overturned. And the A13 is closed out of London just before the Canning Town flyover for accident investigation work. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
We've blown the budget by giving you the chance to win a totally terrific £20,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock and I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I should say happy May Day or Workers' Day or Labour Day, whatever you want to call it. Let's look though, shall we? The Labour Party's New Deal for workers. Bold plans, I tell you. Careful though, don't get too excited, because they're set to be watered down. And I'm asking you, when you think it comes to the majority of rights, where should they sit, with the workers or the companies? You tell me. And also, a cross-party report has been published stating that asylum seekers should be given the right to work after 6 months and, get this, be granted greater access to public services. Do you agree with that? Also, as well, what on earth is going on in Ireland? Do you think it feels like one rule for them and another for us? Let me ask you this as well. Does the UK need an iron dome similar to that of Israel's? We're currently in talks with the EU about providing and creating exactly that. Is it the right move or not? And another day and another attack at a school, this time in Sheffield, and this time a 17-year-old boy arrested for attempted murder. Please help me. What on earth is going on? Yes, indeed.